Chapter 3155. Possession. I know where to find the Panga banner. The Panga banner belonged to the ancient god of creation, Pangu. Aren't you tempted? The green skeleton suddenly shouted, the corners of Joie, Wen's mouth curled up into a mocking smile. With a thought, the black skull swallowed the green skull in an instant. The Panga banner was in his spiritual soul. The green skeleton had to be more skillful in its blackmail. The green skeleton screamed in agony. Then its scream stopped abruptly. Poof! Countless wisps of black smoke were sucked into the Yama ghost diagram, and the dozen or so ghost chains also retracted. Bang! The green skeleton fell to the ground, motionless. The green flames in the skeleton's eyes had already been extinguished. Zhuowen knew that the remaining spiritual soul of the green skeleton had been completely destroyed by the Yama ghost portrait. Zhuowen fell to the ground in a sorry state. Blood flowed out of his orifices, and his consciousness was blurred. Nearly 80% of his divine soul had been shattered by the Yama demon portrait, and only the remaining 20% of his divine soul was supporting him to retain a trace of consciousness. With the destruction of the green skeleton's spiritual soul, the terrifying coercion in the space disappeared completely. Mei felt relieved. She hurried to Zhuowen's side and asked worriedly, Immortal Master Zhuo, are you all right? Get me out of here. Zhuowen's voice was weak as he said to Mei. Mei could see that Zhuowen was in a bad state. Without saying anything, she helped Zhuowen out of the stone chamber. However, what they didn't notice was that a trace of dark green undercurrent suddenly gushed out from the green skeleton that had fallen on the stone chamber and was completely lifeless. This undercurrent suddenly rushed out and swept towards the back of Joie, Wen's head. The speed of the dark green undercurrent was so fast that Zhuowen and Mei did not notice it at first. When they noticed it, the dark green undercurrent had already penetrated into the back of Zhuowen's head. Immortal Master Zhuo, are you all right? Mei sensed that something was amiss and immediately looked at Zhuowen. He noticed that the latter's forehead was covered in cold sweat, and he looked like he was in pain. Zhuowen did not answer. At this moment, his soul was like a lump of paste, and his consciousness was starting to blur. The green undercurrent that had burrowed into Zhuowen's soul was like a maggot that began to wantonly destroy his soul. Brat, you don't know that I still have a trick up my sleeve. I really didn't expect that an ant like you would actually possess such a strange divine artifact. Moreover, he even possesses the inherited divine artifact of the great shaman Ho-E. How extraordinary! But from now on, all the secrets in your body belong to me, and although your physical body is barely passable, it's still passable. The green undercurrent let out a sharp, ear-piercing sound that was filled with pride. Zhuowen recognized the owner of the voice. It was the green skeleton. He really didn't expect this guy to have such a trick up his sleeve. Most likely, this guy had been preparing to take over his body for a long time. His previous performance was just to numb him. However, this green skeleton was very cautious. It kept moving forward in Zhuowen's soul and was always vigilant. Old guy, as long as you don't take over my body, everything is negotiable. I can give you everything I have. Zhuowen's voice became a little frightened and flustered. Zhuowen was naturally not really afraid of being taken over. His soul had the Panga banner. If this guy really took over his body, he would be the unlucky one. However, this green skeleton was very cautious. After entering his soul, the first thing it did was not to take over his body, but to observe his soul. Zhuowen secretly scolded this guy for being too vigilant. If this old guy directly took over his body, he would immediately activate the Panga banner. At that time, this old guy's soul would not be able to escape. Now, you know how to be afraid. Unfortunately, it's too late. The green skeleton felt the fear in Zhuowen's divine thought and couldn't help laughing complacently. Immediately, it relaxed its vigilance and began to take over Zhuowen's body. The green undercurrent became larger and larger, and the light emitted from it became more and more blazing. It filled Zhuowen's soul. However, the moment the green undercurrent spread to the whole soul, the green skeleton immediately screamed. In the depths of Zhuowen's soul, an ancient and powerful energy suddenly surged out and suppressed all the energy of the green undercurrent in an instant. What kind of energy is this? The green skeleton screamed, and its voice was full of disbelief. In front of this ancient and powerful energy, it had no power to resist. It was as if this energy wanted it to die, and it had no choice but to die. Then, the green skeleton's divine thought found that a big banner swept out from the depths of Zhuowen's soul. On the banner, there was a supreme picture of the great god Pangu holding the heaven-splitting divine axe in his hand. Outside the banner, there were mysterious prophecies circling around it, and inside the banner, there were heaven-splitting talismans looming. The five-colored light illuminated the sky, and Panga's divine might shook the world. The moment it saw this big banner, the green skeleton couldn't help but scream. Is this the Panga banner? It's actually the Panga banner. How is this possible? This thing is actually in your soul. The green skeleton finally knew why Zhuowen showed a mocking smile when it said that it wanted to provide clues about the Panga banner. It turned out that the Panga banner that it was talking about was actually in this guy's body. No, let me go this time. I was wrong. I'm willing to bow down to you and obey your orders, as long as you let me go. The green skeleton revealed a look of despair. It had lived for a very long time and knew how terrifying the Panga banner was. It could be said that if it encountered the Panga banner now, it would definitely die. There was no chance of survival at all. The only thing it could do now was to kneel down and beg the young man in front of it for mercy and spare its life. Unfortunately, the green skeleton was answered with a long silence. The pressure of the Panga banner became more and more terrifying. The green skeleton's divine thought was constantly shrinking and being consumed by the power of the Panga banner. In the end, the Panga banner shook violently in Zhuowen's soul, and a terrifying energy spread in his soul, expelling and destroying all the green undercurrents. Uffed, Zhuowen spat out another mouthful of blood. Of the remaining 20% of his soul, another 10% had been destroyed in the battle of possession just now. His head was in so much pain that he was almost dying, and he was about to faint. It was also at this moment that the Panga banner suddenly swept to the center of his soul. Then, a gentle, milky white energy surged out from the Panga banner. This milky white energy fused into Zhuowen's soul, and like a clear stream, it quickly repaired Zhuowen's soul. After an unknown period of time, the Panga banner slowly retracted and hid in the depths of Zhuowen's soul. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. In his eyes, an extremely bright light flickered. The energy that the Panga banner had given him this time was really of great help to his soul. At this moment, his soul had almost undergone a transformation and had made great progress. Chapter 3156, Dark Rock City. After opening his eyes, Zhuowen noticed that there were two more people in the stone room besides Mei Ying. Zhuowen was no stranger to these two people. They were Hongxian City's great guardian Yingjia and Hao Rui from the Dragon Tribe. When the three of them saw that Zhuowen had woken up, they relaxed. Immortal Master Zhuo, you are finally awake. Mei Ying did not get close to Zhuowen. Instead, she stood a distance away from Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes scanned Zhuowen, and she asked with caution, Immortal Master Zhuo, what happened just now? Zhuowen felt helpless. He knew what Mei Ying meant. She probably knew that he had been possessed by the green skeleton. She was not sure if the possession was successful. Zhuowen spread out his hands and said, "City Lord Meiying, don't worry. I was not possessed. That old fellow failed, in the end." Although Zhuowen had explained, Meiying still didn't believe him. Zhuowen had no choice but to tell Meiying about the misunderstanding that had happened in Hongxian Divine City in order to prove that he hadn't been possessed. After all, after the possession, one would become another person. Zhuowen's memories could not be so clear. After hearing Zhuowen's detailed explanation, Meiying finally believed that Zhuowen had not been possessed. "How long have I been unconscious?" Zhuowen looked at Great Guardian Ingjia and Hao Rui from the Dragon Tribe before asking Meiying, "You have been unconscious for 2 days. In these 2 days, we have mined all the jade stones in this mine. There are a total of 2 million jade stones." Speaking of the jade stone mine, Meiying's eyes were filled with excitement. "Are you planning to go to Dark Rock City?" Zhuowen saw that the 3 of them were fully armed, and he knew that Meiying and the rest were planning to bring the 1 million jade stones to Dark Rock City. "Yes, we originally planned to wait for you for another day to see if you would wake up. If you didn't wake up, we would have gone to Dark Rock City first." Meiying said bluntly, "Since you plan to set off, count me in." Zhuowen said with a smile, the matter at the Death Canyon had been completely resolved. After rescuing Mei Su and the others, Zhuowen planned to break into the forbidden area of the Slaughter Heaven region and leave this damned place for good. "But before I leave, City Governor Meiying, I have something to say to you alone." Zhuowen looked at Ingjia and the young man from the Dragon Tribe and said in a deep voice, "Great Guardian Ingjia and the young man from the Dragon Clan were tactful enough to leave the stone chamber. After the 2 of them left, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and took out 30 barrels of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk, saying, "City Lord Meiying, we were able to deal with the green skeleton this time because of your help. This is the reward we agreed on in advance." Meiying was stunned. She knew that Zhuowen had a lot of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk, but she thought that there were only a dozen barrels. However, Zhuowen had taken out more than 30 barrels. This was only 1/3 of the Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk that Zhuowen had with him. Didn't this mean that there were more than 100 barrels of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk on him? At this moment, Meiying felt a little embarrassed. The Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk was too precious. A small bottle of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk was already priceless, let alone the 30 barrels in front of her. "City Governor Meiying, you are welcome. I, Zhuowen, have always been a man of my words. Since I have promised you, I will naturally do it. I will not lie." Zhuowen looked serious as he pushed the 30 barrels of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk to Meiying. Meiying's beautiful eyes were filled with gratitude. At the same time, she thought more highly of Zhuowen. To be honest, the world of cultivation was very cruel. This cruelty was even more vivid in the Slaughter Heaven region. In order to fight for resources, many brothers had turned against each other and friends had killed each other. However, Zhuowen had given her so much Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk just because he had promised her. Meiying knew that Zhuowen was an extremely principled person. "Thank you, Immortal Master Zhuo." Meiying kept the Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk. She summoned her trusted subordinates to transport the 30 barrels of Crimson Moon Star Ripple milk back to Hongxian City. Then, she left Death Canyon with Zhuowen. After walking out of the canyon, Zhuowen realized that there were more than 1,000 cavalrymen waiting outside the canyon. Behind these cavalrymen were groups of carriages. Behind each group of carriages, there were large amounts of emerald stones. However, these emerald stones were covered with white cloth and tied with ropes. Zhuowen looked at these carriages and felt strange. Ever since he had started cultivating, cultivators had basically used spiritual rings to store things. Only the mortal world would need a group of carriages to transport goods. It was rare in the world of cultivation. However, in the Slaughter Heaven region, it was too rare. Moreover, it was a group of cultivators imitating the mortals. After all, spatial artifacts were completely ineffective here. They could only use such primitive methods to transport goods. Of course, Zhuowen's great world was big enough. He could store all the emerald stones in his great world. However, if he did that, the fact that he could open a spatial artifact would become known to everyone. This was not a good thing for him. Therefore, Zhuowen really wouldn't do such a stupid thing. 1,000,000 emerald stones have been prepared. This time, the fastest cavalryman in Hongxian City will be in charge of the transportation. It will take about 4 days to reach Dark Rock Divine City from Death Canyon. By then, we will be able to reach Dark Rock Divine City smoothly. Mei Ying took a dragon horse from a cavalryman. With a kick of her right leg, she mounted the dragon horse. Zhuowen also took a dragon horse and mounted it. He walked side by side with Mei Ying to the front of the group. Great Guardian Yingjia and the young man from the dragon tribe followed closely behind them. Let's go. Our destination is Dark Rock Divine City. Mei Ying's cold voice rang in everyone's ears. Then Mei Ying pulled on the reins. The dragon horse at the front neighed and galloped away. The group behind Mei Ying followed closely behind. The sound of iron hooves thundered across the ground. 4 days later, Mei Ying and Zhuowen rode side by side on their dragon horses and stopped on a small hill. A large group of cavalrymen stood behind the hill. Their eyes were filled with unparalleled fighting spirit. Is that Dark Rock Divine City? Zhuowen gazed into the distance. There lay a gigantic city that was not the slightest bit inferior to the Hongxian Divine City. The huge city looked like a huge meteorite. It was oval in shape. On the surface of the huge city, there was a dark red flowing light. At first glance, one could tell that it was a powerful killing array. Above the city walls of Dark Rock Divine City, Zhuowen saw groups of warriors in black armor. The leader was a middle-aged man with a solemn expression. The middle-aged man was in a black robe. His eyes were as deep as the sea. He looked at the small hill with a faint smile on his face. Yes, this is Dark Rock Divine City. Let's go. Chapter 3157. Meng Tiangan Mei Ying led the team to the city gates of Dark Rock City. The city gates of Dark Rock City glowed with gold and were exceptionally dazzling. The complex and mysterious patterns on the surface of the city gates gave the city gates a mysterious and powerful aura. However, the city gates of Dark Rock City were tightly shut and had no intention of opening because of Mei Ying and the rest. A middle-aged man in a black robe stood on the city walls and looked down at the team of riders. He clapped his hands and said, "City Lord Mei Ying, thank you for your hard work. You have traveled thousands of miles from Hongxian Divine City to Dark Rock City. I welcome you on behalf of the entire Dark Rock City." Although the middle-aged man was welcoming Mei Ying, there was no warmth on his face. Instead, his expression was cold and gloomy. He is the great guardian of Dark Rock City, Meng Tiangan. His strength is about the same as Yingjia's. He is also at the peak of the half-step Tongtian sovereign realm. Mei Ying introduced him to Zhuowen in a low voice. Then he lifted his head and looked coldly at Meng Tiangan. He said, "Great Guardian Meng, I think you know the purpose of my visit today. Are you still not going to open the city gates?" Meng Tiangan glanced at Mei Ying and said, "Have you brought the 1,000,000 emerald stones?" Mei Ying did not speak. He clapped his hands, and the riders behind lifted the white cloth on the carriage. Piles of emerald stones that were emitting emerald light appeared in front of Meng Tiangan. Meng Tiangan's eyes shone with greed when he saw the emerald stones. Although he did not carefully count the number of jade stones, he did a rough estimate in his heart. There should be more than 1,000,000 jade stones here. I have kept my promise and brought the emerald stones that you want. Where are my daughter and Jiang Yi now? Mei Ying asked coldly. Meng Tiangan laughed and said, City Lord Mei Ying has kept his promise. Naturally, we will not be unreasonable. Miss Mei Su and brother Jiang Yi are being treated well by our city lord. City Lord Mei Ying, if you don't mind, you can enter the city first. It won't be too late to leave after we treat you well. Mei Ying's face darkened. She understood what Meng Tiangan meant. She wanted them to enter the dark rock divine city. However, Mei Ying was also very clear that once they entered the dark rock divine city, it would be really difficult for them to come out again. The array formations and restrictions in dark rock divine city were extremely complicated. Their standard was even higher than that of Hongxian divine city. It would be too easy to trap them. Just as Mei Ying was hesitating, Zhuowen said in a deep voice, City Lord Mei Ying, agree with this person. Let's enter the city first. Mei Ying was startled. She looked at Zhuowen and felt a little conflicted. You've forgotten that I'm a divine formation master. There are indeed many formations and restrictions in Dark Rock Divine City, but in my opinion, they are nothing but child's play. This time, I can help you rescue Miss Mei Su and Uncle Jiang. Trust me, Zhuowen said in a low voice. Mei Ying looked deeply at Zhuowen, and her eyes were filled with determination. She could only trust Zhuowen now. Moreover, Zhuowen was right. According to Meng Tiangan, if they didn't enter the Dark Rock Divine City, they wouldn't even be able to see Mei Su and the rest. Open the city gates, Mei Ying said to Meng Tiangan. City Lord Mei Ying is indeed straightforward. Meng Tiangan laughed heartily and immediately ordered his subordinates to open the city gates. After the city gates were opened, Mei Ying commanded from the front as he led the cavalry team behind him into the interior of the Dark Rock Divine City. Meng Tiangan was already waiting behind the city gates. He took the initiative to walk forward and wanted to lead Mei Ying's dragon horse. Unfortunately, Mei Ying pulled on the reins and stopped the dragon horse in its tracks. This made Meng Tiangan, who had stretched out his hand, feel a little awkward. However, in order to hide his embarrassment, Meng Tiangan's frozen right hand reached out toward Zhuowen's dragon horse. Obviously, Meng Tiangan was trying to find a way out. His original intention was not to lead Zhuowen's dragon horse. Zhuowen, who was riding on the dragon horse, revealed a sarcastic smile. He squeezed the dragon horse's belly with his legs, and immediately the dragon horse neighed and galloped forward. Meng Tiangan, who originally wanted to lead Zhuowen's dragon horse, changed his expression and wanted to retreat. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's timing was too accurate. The moment Meng Tiangan retreated, the dragon horse had already charged forward and knocked into Meng Tiangan's chest. Meng Tiangan groaned and rolled on the ground in a sorry state. When he stood up, he saw that Zhuowen had already stopped in front of him. Sorry, this is my first time riding a dragon horse. I couldn't control it well. Zhuowen smiled at Meng Tiangan. However, there was no hint of apology in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of sarcasm. Meng Tiangan was furious. He could tell at a glance that the young man had done it on purpose. You're courting death. Meng Tiangan was furious. He wanted to take a big step forward and gallop toward Zhuowen. Unfortunately, an even stronger aura instantly crushed Meng Tiangan's body. Meng Tiangan did not dare to move. Great Guardian Meng, my nephew is young and ignorant. He has only learned how to ride a dragon horse not long ago. It is pardonable that he couldn't control it well. I believe that as the great guardian of Dark Rock City, you won't mind such a small matter. Mei Ying's cold voice sounded. Meng Tiangong calmed down. He knew that now was not the time to fall out with this group of people. City Lord Mei Ying, you must be joking. Your nephew is innocent, and I like it very much. It was my honor to be able to play with him just now. Meng Tiangong said hypocritically, although Meng Tiangong said that he had already sentenced Zhuowen to death in his heart. A mere eternal overlord, and dared to play with him. If he had the chance, he would definitely let this person die a horrible death. City Lord Mei Ying, follow me to the City Lord mansion now. Our City Lord is waiting for you, Meng Tiangong said with a smile. You lead the way. Mei Ying nodded with a haughty expression. This made Meng Tiangong very unhappy. Auntie, Dark Rock City is much more fun than Hongxian Divine City. I'll take a look around. You guys can talk business. Zhuowen, who was riding a dragon horse not far away, suddenly waved at Mei Ying and happily rode away on his dragon horse. Zhuowen, come back. Mei Ying's pretty face changed slightly. She could not help but shout. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's figure was already far away, and he did not hear her at all. This kid is really too playful. Great Guardian Meng, I'm a little worried about my nephew's safety. He doesn't have much experience, so, Mei Ying said worriedly. Meng Tiangong immediately patted his chest and said, City Lord Mei Ying, don't worry. I'll send 2 experts to follow my nephew. I won't let him come to any harm. Leave it to me. Then I'll have to trouble you, Great Guardian Meng. Mei Ying said gratefully, It's just a small matter. Meng Tiangong chuckled, but his eyes were filled with coldness. This time, he finally found an opportunity. He would indeed send 2 experts. Chapter 3158. Silk Pants in the Dark Rock Divine City. A figure rode on a dragon horse and galloped through the streets at lightning speed, attracting the attention of many residents. However, most of them looked at the figure in surprise before retracting their gazes. There were many rules in the Dark Rock Divine City. Those who dared to ride on a dragon horse in such an arrogant manner were either people of high status or people without brains. They couldn't afford to offend the former, while the latter would be dealt with by the enforcers of the Divine City. The arrogant figure riding on a dragon horse was naturally Zhuowen. Before entering the Dark Rock Divine City, Zhuowen had already discussed with Mei Ying about their strategy. The 2 of them agreed that the only way to enter the Dark Rock Divine City was for Zhuowen to decipher all the formations and restrictions in the Divine City. However, the formation bases of the Divine City's formations were scattered all over the Divine City. This also meant that if Zhuowen wanted to decipher all the formations in the city, he would have to find all the formation bases in the Divine City. In order to achieve this goal, Zhuowen decided to disguise himself as Mei Ying's mischievous nephew. An ignorant young man would easily avoid Meng Tiangong and the rest's suspicions. This would also create time and opportunity for Zhuowen to find the formation bases. Zhuowen rode on the dragon horse and galloped through the bustling streets. Soon, they entered a secluded alley. This alley wasn't eye-catching and was rather secluded. The alley was pitch black, and one could even smell the stench coming from the alley. Zhuowen jumped off the dragon horse and led it into the alley. The moment Zhuowen entered the Dark Rock Divine City, he had already roughly observed the formations in the Divine City. He had to admit that the formations in the Dark Rock Divine City were more powerful and complicated than the Hongxian Divine City. On the surface, Zhuowen could see that there were 12 Genesis grade formations, and that was only on the surface. If he were to explore deeper, he would only discover more formations. Fortunately, there weren't any creation grade formations in the Divine City. Zhuowen could decipher them, but it would take more time. After all, He had just become a heaven-piercing formation god master not long ago, and his foundation had not yet stabilized. Once he had completely stabilized himself, it would be a piece of cake for him to set up a destiny-level grand array. The reason why Zhuowen had stopped in this inconspicuous alley was because there was a large formations foundation in this alley. The surface area of Dark Rock Divine City was huge. In order to set up an array that covered the entire Divine City, there had to be many array bases scattered all over the Divine City. This alley was one of them. The alley was filled with smelly trash. Zhuowen's expression did not change as he came to the end of the alley. He stretched out his right hand and gently placed it on the flat and slightly dirty ground at the end of the alley. Immediately after, a rune with a diameter of 3 meters appeared on the ground. This was the array base. Zhuowen summoned the 9x9 81 Beast Bones array disc with his right hand and performed a hand seal. The Beast Bone formation discs were lined up in an orderly manner in front of Zhuowen. Magical waves of energy surged out from the Beast Bone formation discs, pouring into the spell formation on the ground. Instantly, the spell formation emitted a light with a very high frequency, as though it was being disturbed by something. The unstable light gradually dissipated, and the spell formation returned to its normal state. However, there was a trace of an unusual red light hidden within the spell formation. This red light was like a ticking time bomb. It was attached to the spell formation and seemed like it would explode at any time. After doing all this, Zhuowen led the dragon horse out of the alley. He did not destroy the spell formation hidden in the depths of the alley. Instead, he used his own formation Dao to modify the spell formation. When the spell formation was activated, the red light hidden within the spell formation would be like maggots in a tarsal bone, dyeing the entire spell formation blood red. At that moment, the spell formation would be under Zhuowen's control. Of course, there was another reason why he did not destroy the spell formation. That was, if the spell formation was destroyed, the formation god master who set up the spell formation would definitely notice it. Doing so would alert the enemy. After walking out of the alley, Zhuowen saw 2 figures blocking his path. They were 2 men in black robes. Both of them were not young. They looked like they were in their 30s. One of them, a middle-aged man with a scar on his face, looked very serious. He looked coldly at Zhuowen and said, "Excuse me, are you young Master Zhuowen?" Zhuowen glanced at the 2 men casually. He guessed that they were sent by Meng Tiangan. "Yes. Who are you 2? How do you know my name?" Zhuowen asked, even though he knew the answer. The middle-aged man with a scar on his face cupped his hands respectfully at Zhuowen and said in a deep voice, "I'm Fu Qimai. This is Lu Jingyi. We were sent by Guardian Meng to protect you, young Master Zhuowen." Zhuowen looked surprised. He asked somewhat innocently, "Who is Guardian Meng? Are you talking about the trash that was trampled under my Longma's foot? He's so kind to send people to protect me." Fu Qimai and Lu Jingyi's expressions turned ugly. Fu Qimai said in a deep voice, "Young Master Zhuowen, you better watch your words. Guardian Meng is the guardian of Dark Rock Divine City. He was magnanimous and didn't bother with you over such a small matter. Otherwise," Fu Qimai snorted coldly at this point. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Fu Qimai dared to show murderous intent toward him. It seemed like he had guessed correctly. Meng Tiangan had sent these 2 men with ulterior motives. Their cultivation levels were not bad. They were both early-stage Genesis lords. However, in Zhuowen's opinion, the 2 of them together were not enough to deal with him. Otherwise, what? Is he going to kill me? I'm the nephew of the Hongxian Divine City's city lord. Does he have the guts to do that? Also, the 2 of you are just his 2 dogs. Do you have the guts to do that?" Zhuowen sneered. Young Master Zhuowen, I know you have a noble status. However, you have to know that you are not in Hongxian Divine City. You are in Dark Rock Divine City. I think you should restrain yourself." Fu Qimai's tone turned dark and cold. He and Lu Jingyi exchanged a glance. Soon after, the two of them stood in front and behind Zhuowen. What is the meaning of this? Zhuowen showed a trace of panic. However, he quickly pretended to be calm and said, "I want to see my aunt. Hurry up and bring me there. If my aunt doesn't see me, the two of you will die a horrible death." In the eyes of Fu Qimai and Lu Jingyi, Zhuowen's tone was one of fear. He was definitely afraid and couldn't make up his mind. A trace of disdain appeared in their eyes. In their eyes, Zhuowen was a complete good-for-nothing. He was just relying on the fact that he had the city lord's aunt to throw his weight around in front of them. They looked down on good-for-nothings like him. "Nothing. We just think that young Master Zhuowen is too noisy. We want to make you quiet." Chapter 3159. Zish Xinhan Fu Qimai's right hand was filled with terrifying lightning, making crackling sounds. Boom! Fu Qimai's right palm landed on Zhuowen's face with a dull thud. Fu Qimai laughed heartily. However, he soon realized that something was amiss. His right hand had smashed into Zhuowen's face. Zhuowen should have been sent flying. However, Zhuowen's feet seemed to be rooted to the ground as he stood still like a mountain. Fu Qimai also realized that his right hand was hurting. It was as if his right palm had landed on a solid rock instead of a person's face. Fu Qimai removed his right hand and was horrified to find that Zhuowen was staring at him coldly with his eyes wide open. His eyes were filled with coldness and killing intent, as if he was looking at a dead man. Thump, thump, thump. Fu Qimai could not help but retreat as he looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. What was going on? He had used all his strength to hit Zhou Donghuang's face. Zhou Donghuang was not injured at all. Everything was too strange. Fu Qimai felt a chill run up his spine from the soles of his feet to his head, and he shuddered all over. Retreat. An unprecedented sense of danger filled Fu Qimai's mind as he instinctively retreated. Zhuowen's body was emitting a sparkling light. His playboy aura was completely replaced by a domineering aura. "Do you have the right to retreat without my permission?" Zhuowen's voice was domineering and sarcastic. He stomped his right foot and appeared in front of Fu Qimai as if he had teleported. So fast. Fu Qimai's pupils constricted. Zhuowen was so fast that he could not see him clearly. Boom! When Fu Qimai realized that Zhuowen was right in front of him, the latter's fist was already inches away from him. It landed on his chest and abdomen. Fu Qimai spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. His bones were all shattered, and he was in so much pain that he couldn't even move. Zhuowen's eyes were calm. His Pangu's sacred body was so powerful that the cultivators of the land of creation were almost no different from ants in front of him. Lu Jingyi was stunned. He still hadn't recovered from his shock. He couldn't figure it out. Zhuowen was just Mei Ying's foppish nephew and an eternal overlord, no matter how he looked at it. He was just a piece of trash that they could casually take down. But now, the trash in their eyes had turned the tables and suddenly exploded with such terrifying power, crippling Fu Qimai with one punch. Lu Jingyi regained his senses and fled without hesitation. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than Zhuowen. Before Lu Jingyi could even take a few steps back, Zhuowen had already caught up to him. Zhuowen's fist landed on his spine. An ear-piercing cracking sound rang out as Lu Jingyi's spine was smashed into powder by a tremendous force. He fell to the ground, the intense pain causing him to faint. "Who the hell are you?" Fu Qimai asked in a hoarse voice as he lay paralyzed on the ground, looking at Zhuowen in horror. Fu Qimai wasn't a fool. After seeing Zhuowen cripple the two of them so easily, he knew that this so-called foppish son in front of him was just a disguise. But why did he pretend to be a foppish son and leave Mei Ying and the others? Of course, this thought only flashed through Fu Qimai's mind. The only thing he was worried about now was his own life. He looked at Zhuowen expectantly and said, "Young Master Zhuowen, as long as you let me go, I won't say anything. I'll keep this a secret for you." Zhuowen looked at Fu Qimai silently and said indifferently, "Are you done with your nonsense?" Fu Qimai was stunned. The moment he was stunned, Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and a ball of divine fire enveloped Fu Qimai. Fu Qimai didn't even have time to groan before he was burned to ashes by the divine fire. Zhuowen found another ball of divine fire and disposed of the unconscious Lu Jingyi. Then he leaped onto the dragon horse and rushed out of the alley. He had to find all the array bases in Dark Rock Divine City as soon as possible. Otherwise, Mei Ying and the others might not be able to leave Dark Rock Divine City alive. While Zhuowen was galloping on the streets on the dragon horse, Mei Ying led Great Guardian Jia and the youth from the dragon clan into the city lord's mansion. The 1,000,000 jade stones that Mei Ying had brought had all been taken away by Meng Tiangan's men. When they entered the spacious hall, Mei Ying realized that several tables had already been set up in the hall. On the table, there were fine wine, delicacies, and nectar. It was simply a sumptuous feast. Che Xinhan, the city lord of Dark Rock Divine City, sat on the main seat in the hall. His hair was long and he exuded a dignified aura. In front of the main seat, 5 graceful foreign race beauties were dancing gracefully. It was a feast for the eyes. Other than the city lord, Che Xinhan, the tables below were basically filled with the upper echelons of Dark Rock Divine City. At a glance, Mei Ying saw Mei Su and Jiang Yi sitting cross-legged at the end of the table. Their eyes were glazed over. After Meng Tiangan led Mei Ying and the others into the hall, he went to the center of the hall and knelt on one knee in front of Zish Xinhan. City Lord Mei Ying is here," Meng Tiangan said in a loud voice. Zish Xinhan looked satisfied. He laughed and said, "Great Guardian Meng, you have done well. You will be heavily rewarded this time. However, you should take a seat below first. I will entertain City Lord Mei Ying." Meng Tiangan cupped his fists and retreated to a table below. He slowly sat down. Only then did Zish Xinhan's gaze fall on Mei Ying and the others. His eyes revealed a strange emotion as he said, "Mei Ying, after so many years, you are finally willing to come to Dark Rock Divine City again." Mei Ying coldly glanced at Zish Xinhan and ignored him. He went straight to the end of the table and walked to the side of Jiang Yi and Mei Su. "Mei Su, Jiang Yi, are you two all right?" Mei Ying shook the two of them and found that they were like wooden puppets. They did not respond at all. "Zish Xinhan, what did you do to them?" Mei Ying's beautiful face changed slightly. Her beautiful eyes looked angrily at the burly foreign race man on the main seat. Zish Xinhan elegantly raised his bronze wine cup and drank the wine in it in one gulp. Dong! The crisp sound of the cup hitting the table rang out. Zish Xinhan said indifferently, "The two of them were too disobedient. In order to make them more obedient, I planted the soul-devouring parasite in them. Don't worry, their lives will not be in danger." Mei Ying suddenly stood up. The aura of the Lord of Skirich poured out in torrents. The entire hall was engulfed by the terrifying aura. The surrounding tables trembled violently and were overturned. The other people sitting at the tables all retreated in a sorry state. Chapter 3160. Marriage Alliance. You planted soul-devouring parasites in Mei Su and Jiang Yi? Mei Ying's eyes were filled with unconcealable killing intent. She glared at Zish Xinhan, her powerful aura like a storm growing more and more intense in the hall. Soul-devouring parasites were a kind of killing beast in the Massacre Heavenly Domain, but they were very small and almost impossible to see with the naked eye. These killing beasts loved to devour cultivators' souls. Once a cultivator was unlucky enough to be targeted by a group of soul-devouring parasites, the chances of survival were very low. These soul-devouring parasites would rapidly invade a cultivator's soul through their 7 orifices. The more soul-devouring parasites there were, the faster the soul would be eroded. The reason why Mei Ying was so furious, aside from the terror of the soul-devouring parasites, was that it was very difficult to get rid of them. In the Massacre Heavenly Domain, there were basically no cultivators who could get rid of the soul-devouring parasites, and those who were inflicted with the parasites could only take the corresponding elixir to suppress the parasites' actions. Meng Tiangan and the other higher-ups' expressions changed slightly as they retreated. They almost retreated to the edge of the hall, their faces pale. Meng Tiangan looked at Mei Ying with fear. He did not expect the latter to be so strong. Based on the aura Mei Ying was displaying, this woman's cultivation had at least reached the peak of the early stage of the Heavenly Domain realm, not far from the middle stage. After Zish Xinhan put down his wine cup, a vast aura that was not weaker than Mei Ying's poured out from his body like a tide. In just an instant, the terrifying aura released by Mei Ying was suppressed by Zish Xinhan's aura. Mei Ying's expression changed greatly. She looked at Zish Xinhan in disbelief and said, "You broke through?" The moment Zish Xinhan's aura erupted, Meng Tiangan and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They straightened their clothes, tidied up the table in front of them, and sat down again. Mei Ying was powerful, but they knew that their city lord had broken through the shackles in recent years and did not fear Mei Ying at all. Moreover, Mei Ying had stepped into Dark Rock City, their territory, which was filled with dense array formations and restrictions. If they were not careful, Mei Ying and everyone in Hongxian Divine City would die with just a word from Zish Xinhan. Zish Xinhan's eyes were filled with a strong sense of satisfaction as he said, faintly, "Mei Ying, in the past it was always your cultivation that suppressed mine, but now the tables have turned. You probably didn't expect me to break through faster than you did. I can tell you clearly that even if I don't use the array formation of Dark Rock Divine City, the people of Hongxian Divine City won't be able to leave this place so easily without my permission. Mei Ying, you can only restrain yourself in front of me. Otherwise, you won't just be harming yourself, you'll be harming everyone in Hongxian Divine City." Mei Ying was trembling with anger, but there was nothing she could do. She could only restrain her aura. She was very clear that Zish Xinhan had already broken through to the middle heaven connecting master realm and was stronger than her. She simply couldn't do anything to him. Seeing that Mei Ying had restrained his aura, Zish Xinhan revealed a satisfied look. He stretched out his slightly thick right hand and beckoned to Mei Ying, the strange look in his eyes becoming increasingly intense. "Mei Ying, come to my side. We haven't seen each other for a long time. I really miss you." Although Zish Xinhan's voice was calm, the fiery look in his eyes revealed his current inner emotions. Meng Tiangan and the rest sat below, silent. They all knew that Zish Xinhan had once pursued Mei Ying. However, Mei Ying was simply too outstanding at that time, and her strength was also a head above Zish Xinhan's. Mei Ying naturally wouldn't fall for a man weaker than her, so she unceremoniously rejected Zish Xinhan. But now, Zish Xinhan's cultivation had surpassed Mei Ying's in one fell swoop. They all knew that Zish Xinhan intended to court Mei Ying again. They also knew that Zish Xinhan had gone through a lot of trouble to kidnap Mei Su and bring her to Dark Rock Divine City. The 1,000,000 jade stones were secondary. His main goal was to get Mei Ying to come over personally. Mei Ying avoided Zish Xinhan's fiery gaze. She was very clear about Zish Xinhan's feelings for her. However, she wasn't interested in Zish Xinhan at all, because what she saw in Zish Xinhan's eyes was undisguised possessiveness. She was very repulsed by such possessiveness. "There's no need. I'll just sit here." Mei Ying declined Zish Xinhan's invitation. Instead, she sat beside Mei Su and Jiang Ye's table. Great Guardian Jia and the Dragon Clan youth, Hao Rue, followed closely beside Mei Ying and sat down at the table beside her. "Zish Xinhan, you said before that you would let Mei Su and Jiang Yi go if I brought 1,000,000 jade stones here. Now that I've given you 1,000,000 jade stones, you should also fulfill your promise. Also, when you sent me the message, you didn't say that you would use the soul-devouring parasite on them. Now that you've used it on them, shouldn't you give me a reasonable explanation?" Mei Ying sat down, and her expression calmed down. Just now, she had checked on Mei Su and Jiang Yi. Although they had been inflicted with the soul-devouring parasite, it wasn't that bad. Zish Xinhan should have only planted a small amount of the soul-devouring parasite on them. Zish Xinhan didn't mind Mei Ying's rejection. He put down his hand and said indifferently, "Mei Ying, I'm a man of my word. Since I've promised you, I naturally won't go back on my words. I can return Mei Su and Jiang Yi to you. Moreover, I'll also let the people of Hongxian Divine City leave Dark Rock Divine City unharmed." Mei Ying suspected that she had heard wrongly. Zish Xinhan was so kind that he would let the people of Hongxian Divine City walk into a trap and enter Dark Rock Divine City. Mei Ying originally thought that Zish Xinhan wouldn't let them go so easily. However, Zish Xinhan had agreed to let them go so easily. This made Mei Ying feel incredulous. "However, I have a condition. As long as you agree to this condition, Mei Ying, I'll return your 1,000,000 jade stones intact. I know that Hongxian Divine City is also lacking in jade stones. It's not easy for you to take out 1,000,000 jade stones." Zish Xinhan's right hand tapped on the table. His gaze was terrifyingly calm. Meng Tiangon and the others were seated below, motionless. Even the sound of their breathing could be heard. Mei Ying frowned slightly. She felt uneasy. She had a feeling that Zish Xinhan's condition wasn't a good thing. Zish Xinhan didn't care about the uneasy Mei Ying. He paused for a moment and looked at Mei Ying with a burning gaze. His voice was gentle as he said, "The condition is that you and I are united by marriage. Our two divine cities will unite." Chapter 3161. Gu, when the entire hall was eerily silent. One could even hear a pin drop. Everyone in the hall looked at Zish Xinhan in shock. Aside from Mei Ying, all the higher-ups of Dark Rock City, including Meng Tiangon, were also in disbelief. Mei Ying found it unbelievable. She had never thought of marrying Zish Xinhan. Moreover, Zish Xinhan's marriage partner was herself. This shocked and repelled Mei Ying. Meng Tiangon and the others were shocked because Zish Xinhan had never mentioned the marriage to them. They only found out now that it was too sudden. There was no acceptance process. "Mei Ying, as long as you agree to my condition, everything will be fine. I've also thought about it. This is definitely a way to make everyone happy. There are 3 divine cities in the Slaughter Heavenly Realm, and only 2 of ours belong to the alien races. The Quiet Sun Divine City was built by the human race. To us, the human race is nothing but a lowly slave. What qualifications do they have to be on equal footing with us? If you and I work together, destroying the Quiet Sun Divine City will be a piece of cake." Zish Xinhan said patiently, unable to conceal the excitement in his voice. The city lord's words are wise. You are indeed a great strategist. If the quiet Sun Divine City disappears, we will obtain even more jade stone resources. Meng Tiangong hurriedly chimed in. The others also raised their cups to Zish Xinhan. Zish Xinhan laughed, but his eyes were fixed on Mei Ying. Mei Ying, why aren't you saying anything? Am I wrong? Mei Ying's pretty face turned ugly. She remained silent. The fate of the people in Hongxian Divine City was in Zish Xinhan's hands. If she didn't answer well, it would be easy to anger Zish Xinhan. At that time, the people she brought along would suffer along with her. At this moment, Mei Ying couldn't help but think of Zhuowen. She didn't know if Zhuowen had solved the problem of Dark Rock City's great array. As long as the problem was solved, she wouldn't be in such a passive position. Although Zish Xinhan's cultivation had broken through to the mid-stage transcending Heaven Lord, his background wasn't very good. In the great desolate heaven domain, Zija Xinhan's race could only be ranked below average, while Mei Ying was from one of the top 10 races, the nine-tailed fox race. The reason why the 10 great races were so famous in the great desolate heaven realm was naturally not because they were paper tigers. The innate divine powers of the 10 great races were all extremely terrifying. As a member of the nine-tailed fox clan, Mei Ying possessed a powerful soul ambush. Relying on this innate divine ability, Mei Ying and Ziju Xianhan's battle was not a problem at all. Now, Mei Ying was mainly wary of the array restrictions in Dark Rock Divine City. As long as these worries were removed, she would immediately get up and kill her way out. Ha! City Lord Mei Ying should be so happy that he couldn't speak. I even saw City Lord Mei Ying secretly laughing just now. A young man with fish scales on his face said with a chuckle from the seat below, this youth's cultivation was actually not weak. He was actually the same as Hao Rui, an early-stage lord of creation. After the young man with fish scales said this, he looked provocatively at the young man from the dragon race sitting next to Jia, his eyes full of disdain. The young man from the dragon race narrowed his eyes and felt a little angry. He naturally knew this young man with fish scales. He was the number 1 genius of Dark Rock Divine City, Guwan. Dark Rock Divine City and Hongxian Divine City were originally competitors. The young man with fish scales was the number 1 genius of Dark Rock Divine City, while the young man from the dragon race was the number 1 genius of Hongxian Divine City. These two geniuses were often compared by others. However, although the two divine cities were competitors, they had never truly come into contact with each other. There were only small skirmishes. The young man with fish scales, Guwan, and the young man from the dragon race, Hao Rui, were often compared by others, but the two had never fought head-on. As for who was stronger and who was weaker, it was only a guess by others. Guwan, who do you think you are? Our city lord's status is honorable. Who are you to talk nonsense about him? The young man from the dragon race suddenly stood up. His eyes were like lightning as he looked at the young man with fish scales. His tone was very unfriendly. The young man with fish scales also stood up and looked provocatively at Hao Rui. He shook his head and said, Hao Rui, you are the number 1 genius of Hongxian Divine City, aren't you? How can you be so immature, like a child? I originally thought that you were an equal opponent, but now that I have finally met you, I feel that I was too naive. You are really not worthy of being my opponent. After saying this, Guwan shook his head, but the provocation in his eyes was extremely strong. Everyone present could see that Guwan was trying to goad Hao Rui into a fight, wanting to infuriate him. Sitting in the main seat, Zish Xinhan silently watched all of this, the corners of his mouth revealing a thought-provoking smile. He did not mention the condition to Mei Ying again. In his opinion, Mei Ying was completely under his control and could not escape. He also knew that Mei Ying would need some time to accept this condition, so he was happy to wait for Mei Ying's decision. Naturally, he could tell what the fish-scaled youth was thinking. Gwyn was a very warlike fellow, and he was extremely proud to the bone. Back then, when others compared him to Hao Rui and found that they were equally matched, Gu Wen was furious. In Gu Wen's eyes, no one in the younger generation of the Massacre Firmament was his match. Whether it was the geniuses of Hongxian Divine City or the human race's quiet Sun Divine City, they could only be trampled under his feet. Zish Xinhan indeed felt that Gu Wen was very arrogant, but he knew that Gu Wen had the right to be arrogant. Although Gu Wen was not one of the 10 great races, his background was higher than his own. Most importantly, Gu Wen was a variant. In the primitive firmament, variants were filled with many variables. Some of the mutants had extremely weak potential, but some were extremely terrifying and powerful. And Gu Wen just so happened to be one of those extremely powerful variants. In Zish Xinhan's eyes, Gu Wen's talent and strength were completely comparable to the young geniuses of the 10 great races. Hao Rui was born of the dragon race and had decent talent, but Zish Xinhan knew that Hao Rui could only shine in the Massacre Firmament. But in the dragon race, Hao Rui's talent could only be considered average. There were many dragons with greater talent and strength than him. Gu Wen's arrogance made him unhappy when others compared him to Hao Rui. In Gu Wen's eyes, Hao Rui did not have the qualifications to be compared to him. This time, he tried to provoke Hao Rui into a fight to infuriate him. Gu Wen's goal was achieved. Hao Rui was indeed infuriated by him. Mei Ying frowned as she looked at the arrogant Gu Wen. She could not see Gu Wen's race, but she was certain that he was not one of the 10 great races. Chapter 3162. A battle to the death. Hao Rui was so angry that his face turned red. He stared coldly at the youth with fish scales. He could also tell that the fish-scaled youth was not from one of the 10 great races. His background was far inferior to his. Although Hao Rui could only be considered an ordinary genius in the Dragon Clan, it was one of the 10 great races after all. He naturally had his own pride. Hao Rui also knew that many people were secretly comparing him to Dark Rock City's Gu Wen, but Hao Rui didn't care. He was very confident in himself and didn't think much of Gu Wen as he saw it. So what if Gu Wen's cultivation was the same as his? In terms of background, Gu Wen was far inferior to him. With the same level of cultivation, his strength would definitely be far inferior. But now Jevon, whom he had never taken seriously before, actually showed disdain for him. This made Hao Rui feel insulted. "You're saying that I'm not worthy to be your opponent? Then do you dare to fight me?" Hao Rui was burning with anger. A powerful aura burst out from his body. His hair fluttered without any wind, and his battle intent surged. Gu Wen sneered. "Why wouldn't I dare? I was afraid that you would be a coward and not dare to fight with me. Now that you've come out to challenge me, it means that you're not as bad as I thought." Hao Rui was furious, but he still restrained himself and said coldly, "Let's fight. I'll let you know how laughable your arrogance is." "I'm looking forward to it," Govan said with a faint smile. Mei Ying felt that something was amiss. He pulled Hao Rui and said, "Hao Rui, Gu Wen isn't simple. He was probably trying to goad you into action. Just now." Hao Rui said in a low voice, "City Lord, I naturally know that he's trying to goad me, but I couldn't take it anymore. Who does he think he is? He's not even one of the 10 great races, yet he dares to look down on me like this? What qualifications does he have?" Mei Ying sighed. She didn't try to persuade Hao Rui anymore. Hao Rui was born in the dragon race and had always been proud at heart and haughty in manner. In Hongxian God City, The only people Hao Rui admired were her and Grand Guardianing Jia. This was because she and Great Protectoring Jia were both members of the Nine-Tailed Fox clan, and were part of the same 10 great clans as Hao Rui. Other than the two of them, Hao Rui was completely unconvinced by the other experts in Hongxian God City, including Vice City Lord Jiang Yi. It could be said that Hao Rui valued his race very much and was proud of his race. Gu Wen's background was clearly inferior to Hao Rui's. If Gu Wen didn't provoke him, Hao Rui wouldn't care at all. Mei Ying knew that with Hao Rui's character, he would not take this lying down. She was very clear about Hao Rui's strength. Regarding this battle, she felt that Hao Rui's chances of winning were much higher. But when she saw Gwen's calm gaze, she had a bad feeling. As for why she had such a feeling, she couldn't explain it. Lord City Lord, Gu Wen requests to fight Hao Rui. I hope that Lord City Lord will allow it. Gu Wen came to the center of the hall and knelt on one knee in front of Zish Xinhan, his expression respectful. Ziju Xinhan pretended to hesitate and said, Gu Wen, this Hao Rui isn't an ordinary genius. He's from the dragon race. You're too impulsive. I think we should just forget about it. Zish Xinhan's words made the indignant Hao Rui look a little better. He cupped his fists towards Zish Xinhan and said, City Lord Zish, Hao Rui isn't someone who doesn't know when to advance or retreat. If Brother Gu Wen doesn't want to fight, I won't pursue him relentlessly. However, Gu Wen needs to apologize to me for his previous rudeness. Zish Xinhan glanced at Hao Rui indifferently and didn't answer. Instead, he looked at Gu Wen and continued, Gu Wen, you should know what I mean. You can't be too heavy-handed. You can't kill him. Gu Wen nodded and said, City Lord, don't worry. Gu Wen has a sense of propriety. This Hao Rui is a guest after all. I won't let him lose too badly. Since that's the case, then I agree to your battle with Hao Rui. Zish Xinhan nodded and lazily leaned back in his seat. His right hand held a wine cup and gently fiddled with it. He ignored Hao Rui's ugly expression and looked at Mei Ying. City Lord Mei Ying, you shouldn't have any objections to Gu Wen and Hao Rui's battle, right? Mei Ying frowned. She felt that something was wrong. Gu Wen and Zish Xinhan were too confident, but she didn't know where their confidence came from. Hao Rui had the dragon race's bloodline and was undoubtedly much stronger than Gu Wen. If the two fought, Hao Rui would definitely win. However, Mei Ying could not make up his mind based on the expressions of the two men. City Lord, let's agree. Since this Gu Wen sincerely wants to embarrass me, I'll fulfill his wish. Hao Rui quickly asked for instructions. Mei Ying was helpless and could only nod. Since that's the case, then you fight with him. Speaking up to here, Mei Ying said to Zish Xinhan in a deep voice, I agree to this battle, but both sides must stop before going too far. Zish Xinhan smiled faintly. That's natural, but this hall is too small. Let's set up the arena outside the hall. It's spacious there. Zish Xinhan stood up and waved his hand. Everyone stood up and walked out of the hall. As the main characters of this battle, Gu Wen and Hao Rui were the first to leave the hall. Mei Ying led Mei Su and Jiang Yi out of the hall. Zish Xinhan stood in the hallway outside the hall. Everyone else was standing around Zish Xinhan, silently looking at Gavin and Hao Rui in the hallway. The two walked out of the hall and landed on the open space, facing each other. The battle intent between them was strong. Gu Wen, since City Lord Mei Ying doesn't believe in her family's genius, then when you fight with Hao Rui, you must stop before going too far. Don't injure him. Understand? Zish Xinhan clasped his hands behind his back, his voice loud and clear with a trace of ridicule. Hee, since City Lord Mei Ying asked for it, I will act appropriately. I'm just afraid that this Hao Rui won't be able to take a beating. I might not even use my strength, and he'll be defeated. That's so boring, but that's all I can do." Guwen shook his head, his voice full of ridicule. How Rue was so angry that his knuckles cracked. He coldly said, "Humph, why should we hold back when we fight? Let's fight to our heart's content. Life and death are up to the heavens." "Hee, your city lord is worried about you. Life and death are up to the heavens? You're really giving advice after the fact. Don't worry, your city lord is worried about you, so I will naturally hold back. I won't be heavy-handed." Guwen mocked and ridiculed. How Rue's right foot suddenly stomped. He cupped his fists towards Mei Ying and said, "City Lord, please allow me to have a life and death battle with Guwen. Today, I must fight to my heart's content." How Rue looked at Mei Ying expectantly, after being ridiculed and looked down on by Guwen. How Rue had a stomach full of anger. If he couldn't teach this Guwen a lesson, his heart would be sullen. Mei Ying was a little hesitant, but after seeing how Rue's expectant gaze, she finally nodded in agreement. "Haha, you're really bold. Mei Ying, I have a whole new level of respect for you." Zish Xinhan approached Mei Ying, his voice magnetic and intimate. Mei Ying retreated a few steps, deliberately keeping a distance from Zish Xinhan. Zish Xinhan didn't mind. He looked at the two figures in the open space and said, "Since it's a life and death battle, then there's no need for both sides to hold back. I'm a straightforward person and don't like to be wishy-washy." Chapter 3163. Variant species. As soon as Zish Xinhan finished speaking, how Rue's right foot stomped on the ground, and a violent energy erupted from his body. Dragon scales crazily spread all over how Rue's body, and soon his entire body was covered in thick scales. His pair of dark golden eyes looked sharp and terrifying. In that instant, how Rue completely unleashed his dragon bloodline, and his strength rose to an extremely terrifying level. Although how Rue was still only at the early stage of the creation realm, the sharp aura he exuded far surpassed that of the early stage of the creation realm. Whoosh! How Rue instantly arrived in front of Guwen. At this moment, he had completely transformed into a dragon man. He was more than 10 meters tall and densely covered in dragon scales. In particular, the dragon tail behind him was slender and straight, filled with an intense, intimidating aura. Rumble! The instant how Rue arrived in front of Guwen, his right fist, which had been accumulating power, exploded through the air and landed in front of Guwen's face. This fist was too terrifying. The surrounding air actually emitted continuous explosions as if something was exploding in a large area. Guwen frowned. He clearly hadn't expected how Wei to use his full strength right from the start. Bang! Guwen crossed his arms in front of him, and then how Rue's fist landed on his arms. Thump, thump, thump. Guwen retreated repeatedly, and with every step he took, an extremely terrifying explosion would erupt under his feet. This was the sound of his feet colliding with the ground, and the ground couldn't withstand the force and shattered. The instant Guwen stopped, a violent gale swept over. How Rue took advantage of his victory to pursue and attack. He wanted to completely annihilate Guwen. Thump, thump, thump. How Rue was like a god of war, throwing out punch after punch. Each punch could shatter space and freeze time. Under how Rue's violent attacks, Guwen could only passively dodge and retreat, seemingly without any ability to resist. Great Protector Ingjia inwardly sighed at this scene. He smiled and said to Mei Ying beside him, "City Lord, it looks like how Rue is going to win this time." Mei Ying frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Ingjia, haven't you noticed that Guwen hasn't attacked at all? He's basically just defending. Even if his bloodline is inferior to how Rue's, he's still an early-stage Lord of Creation. It's impossible for him to not be able to unleash a single attack." Ingjia thought about it and felt that something was wrong. Wen's performance was indeed too weak. Rumble! How Rui's speed was as fast as lightning. In an instant, he appeared at Gu Wen's left side. His right hand clenched into a fist and fiercely punched the space on Gu Wen's left side. Bang! In that instant, Wen barely managed to free a hand to block Hao Rui's fist. A strong wind swept out as the fist wind exploded. Then, Gu Wen let out a muffled groan as he flew backwards, smashing heavily into the ground not far away. Hao Rui gasped for breath. Seeing that Gu Wen had been knocked to the ground by him, his heart relaxed a lot. He gently wiped away the sweat on his forehead. He knew that Gwen's injuries were not light after being suppressed by him like this. He was afraid that Gwen might not even be able to get up now. Although Hao Rui was infuriated by Gu Wen's arrogance, he wasn't someone who would willfully slaughter the innocent. He slowly walked towards Gu Wen and indifferently said, "Gu Wen, I won't take your life, but before that, you have to apologize to me for your previous provocation and contempt. As long as you apologize, the enmity between us will be severed, and I won't attack you." Gu Wen slowly stood up. He looked at Hao Rui with a mocking gaze and said, "Hao Rui, I said that you don't have the qualifications to be my opponent, but you think too highly of yourself and look down on me. Today, I'll let you know the price you have to pay for looking down on me." Hao Rui looked at Gu Wen in astonishment and said in a deep voice, "You won't apologize? Then you're courting death." Hao Rui coldly snorted and took a step forward. His right hand, covered in dragon scales, clenched into a fist. He moved as fast as lightning and arrived in front of Gu Wen. Hao Rui punched out, and a world-shaking dragon roar resounded. Immediately after, a huge shadow of a dragon swept up behind Hao Rui. The dragon circled in the air behind Hao Rui, bringing with it a supreme dragon's might that suppressed everything in the surroundings. "This is my innate ability, Dragon's Might, and also my strongest attack. If you can survive this attack, I won't attack you again, and will spare your life. If you're unlucky enough to die from this attack, you can only blame yourself for not being strong enough. Your death won't be regrettable." Hao Rui's gaze was cold. His right fist finally landed in front of Gu Wen. The incomparably huge dragon shadow swooped down, and with Hao Rui's fist, it instantly enveloped Gu Wen's tiny figure. In the corridor, the expressions of Meng Tiangan and the other higher-ups of Dark Rock City all changed slightly. Hao Rui's innate ability, Dragon's Might, was extremely powerful, especially when it was supported by Dragon's Might. It definitely surpassed the strength of an ordinary early-stage Lord of Creation. It had already reached the level of a mid-stage Lord of Creation. Only Zish Xinhan stood calmly in place, calmly watching the scene unfold in the open space. Mei Ying and Chief Enforcer Ing Jie sighed softly. They'd originally thought that Gu Wen might have been holding back and waiting for the final moment to erupt. Now it seemed that they'd been overthinking things. Gu Wen really didn't have any real ability. Under Hao Rui's terrifying Dragon's Might, even if Gu Wen didn't die, he'd lose a layer of skin. Rip! Just as everyone's expressions were different and their imaginations were running wild, the violent dragon suddenly wailed and was torn apart. What had torn it apart was an enormous whale even larger than the dragon. This whale was 3 times the size of the dragon and was extraordinarily fast. There was a sharp spiral horn on its head. It was this whale that had torn the dragon apart. The instant the dragon was torn apart, Hao Rui suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was pale, and he couldn't help but retreat several dozen steps. His gaze was filled with disbelief. When he raised his head, he saw Gu Wen slowly walking out of the dust. That incomparably huge whale circled above Gu Wen's head, constantly circling and crying, its voice loud and deafening. "How can your innate ability be so terrifying? You're clearly not one of the 10 great races. Hao Rui was shocked. He clutched his chest and spoke in a hoarse voice. Gu Wen slowly walked over with a mocking smile on his face. He faintly said, I'm indeed not from one of the top 10 clans. To be honest, my birth is very humble. I'm only from the Luo Yu clan. The Luo Yu clan is a lowly race at the bottom of the primitive heaven domain. They're far inferior to your dragon clan. But so what? So what if you, Hao Rui, were born with a noble background? So what if you were born with a golden spoon in your mouth? You're going to die at my hands today. Gu Wen sneered and suddenly sped up. The enormous whale above his head cried out excitedly. This guy's a variant. Hao Rui, hurry up and admit defeat. Chapter 3164. Gavin's power. Mei Ying's face turned ugly. She had not expected Gu Wen to be a mutant. Gu Wen was right. The Luo Yu clan was indeed a lowly clan at the bottom of the primitive heaven realm. Such a lowly race had almost no status in the great desolate heaven realm. Their treatment was equivalent to that of a slave. The entire race lived a miserable life. However, Gorwin wasn't an ordinary fish. He was a mutant. Although he was born lowly, he had the aura of a mutant above his head. Mutants were a race that had undergone a mutation, and this mutation could happen to any race. Mutants had both advantages and disadvantages because it was an extreme process. When a species mutated, they would either become very strong or very weak. In the history of the 10 great races, there had been some cases of mutation. However, most of them had become very weak. Some had even been crippled and were worse than mortals. As for Gu Wen, he was born lowly, but he had such great luck. Not only had he mutated, but he had also become so powerful. Mei Ying could tell at a glance that Gu Wen's innate ability was many times stronger than Hao Rui's. Hao Rui also came back to his senses. He hurriedly admitted defeat and quickly retreated. Unfortunately, Gu Wen's face was filled with a mocking sneer. Shortly after, Gu Wen's figure disappeared from his original position as fast as lightning, rushing towards Hao Rui. Hao Rui could clearly feel the killing intent in Gu Wen's eyes. He knew that Gu Wen really wanted to kill him. Bang! Before Hao Rui could completely withdraw, a strong gust of wind came from behind him, smashing heavily into his spine. Hao Rui screamed in pain. He could clearly feel that his spine had been shattered by that punch. That intense pain made him feel like he was better off dead than alive. Hao Rui fell to the ground. Before he could recover, Gwyn had already arrived beside Hao Rui. Gwyn's right foot stomped down on Hao Rui's head, causing it to slam into the ground. Hao Rui's skills are not as good as his opponent's. I admit defeat now. There's no need to fight anymore. Mei Ying looked at Zish Xinhan and said in a low voice. Ziju Xinhan's mouth curled into a playful smile as he said, Mei Ying, did you not hear my words clearly? Just now, Hao Rui and Gu Wen had already decided on a death match. In a battle of life and death, victory and defeat can only be determined by life and death. Nothing else can decide. If Hao Rui of your Hongxian Divine City wants to survive, then he can only do so by defeating Gu Wen. Mei Ying was furious. She looked coldly at Zish Xinhan and said in a hoarse voice, Do you want Hao Rui to die in front of me? Ziju Xinhan quickly raised his hands and said, Mei Ying, how could I do such a cruel thing? As long as you agree to be my woman, I will listen to you. I will stop this kind of thing. Mei Ying was silent. She didn't think that Zish Xianhan would actually use this kind of thing to threaten her. Hao Rui was Hongxian God City's future hope. She naturally didn't want Hao Rui to fall just like that. But she didn't want to marry Zish Xinhan even more. For a moment, Mei Ying was in a dilemma. Zish Shinhan saw that Mei Ying had fallen into silence, and the corners of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He then gave Gu Wen a meaningful look. Gu Wen, who got the hint, grinned. Soon after, he lifted the half-dead Hao Rui with one hand and threw him into the air. Gu Wen jumped up and appeared beside Hao Rui in the air. He then raised his right leg above his head and smashed it into Hao Rui's abdomen. Hao Rui grimaced in pain. He fell like a meteor and smashed into the ground. Gu Wen hovered in the air and looked down coldly at Hao Rui. He said indifferently, "Good for nothing, farewell." After Gu Wen finished speaking, the phantom of the huge whale in the air suddenly whistled and fell towards Hao Rui. Powerful and violent wind-breaking sounds, as well as terrifying tearing sounds, swept across the entire open space. Mei Ying's expression changed greatly. The phantom of the huge whale summoned by Gu Wen was too terrifying. She was very clear that if Hao Rui was hit by the phantom of the huge whale, he would definitely be smashed to pieces and die, without a burial place. Stop. Mei Ying couldn't just sit and wait for death. Hao Rui was the future hope of Hongxian Divine City. He was the most likely candidate to become the next city lord. How could Mei Ying just watch such an outstanding junior die in front of him like this? Unfortunately, Mei Ying's figure was immediately intercepted by Zish Shinhan. Scram! Mei Ying's body emitted a faint light, and then he disappeared. Soul surprise attack? It's a pity that I've long been on guard against your innate ability. Zish Shinhan's lips curled into a playful smile. Soon after, he took out a blue talisman and threw it out. Instantly, countless blue threads gushed out from the blue talisman. Soon after, these blue threads spread throughout the entire area. When he was about 10 meters away from Hao Rui, Mei Ying's figure was forced to appear. The moment he appeared, Mei Ying felt an intense numbness spread throughout his body. He couldn't move at all. Of course, this numbness only appeared for a breath of time before disappearing. But this breath of time was too crucial. He had lost his last chance to save Hao Rui. It was also at this moment that Zish Shinhan rushed to Mei Ying's side. His right hand wrapped around his slender waist, and they left the area in an instant. Rumble! The giant whale landed on the ground, submerging Hao Rui's figure. Immediately after, the entire area, and even the entire Dark Rock Divine City, shook violently. Everyone in the city panicked and didn't know what was going on. However, none of the people present knew that at the moment the giant whale landed, a figure had quietly rushed in. Rip! Suddenly, the giant whale phantom was torn apart by an indescribably powerful force. It was torn into pieces and then into fine powder. Everyone in the corridor was stunned. Even Gu Wen, who was floating in the air, was stunned. In his opinion, Hao Rui must have been torn to pieces by the giant whale phantom. Then, the giant whale phantom would return to his side. But now, it was the giant whale phantom that was torn apart. Could it be Hao Rui's doing? Gu Wen found it inconceivable. In his opinion, Hao Rui couldn't compare to him at all. How could he tear apart his giant whale phantom? The giant whale phantom dissipated, and a figure slowly walked out. This figure's appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but his exposed body was actually emitting a sparkling and translucent light, like the light of a firefly. At the same time, Gu Wen also noticed that beside this figure, there was another figure in a sorry state. After the two figures walked out of the smoke and dust, everyone could finally see their faces clearly. The sorry figure being supported was naturally Hao Rui, whose spine had been severely injured. Chapter 3165. Furious Gu Wen. Gu Wen furrowed his brows as he stared at the approaching black-haired, black-eyed youth. He was certain that he'd never seen this youth before. He was a complete stranger. But just now, The giant whale phantom he'd summoned with his innate ability had been torn apart by an extremely powerful force. He suspected that the source of that force was the black-haired, black-eyed youth in front of him. But soon, doubt arose in Gu Wen's heart. The aura of the black-haired youth supporting Hao Rui was exceedingly weak. According to Gu Wen's estimation, the youth was only an eternal overlord. With such a cultivation, he probably wouldn't even be able to withstand a casual blow from the giant whale phantom, much less withstand the attack. Mei Ying and Chief Enforcer Ying Jie's eyes lit up when they saw the black-haired youth. They were naturally no strangers to the black-haired youth. It was Zhuowen. They knew that Zhuowen was very strong. Back then, he'd knocked Hao Rui to the ground with a single blow and displayed a heaven-defying performance in Death Canyon. Mei Ying wasn't surprised that Zhuowen had been able to block the giant whale phantom's attack. Of course, Mei Ying wasn't excited because Zhuowen had rushed over to save Hao Rui. It was because she knew that Zhuowen's arrival meant that Zhuowen had destroyed the array foundations of all the grand formations in Dark Rock Divine City. Zish Xinhan naturally noticed Mei Ying's strange behavior. He glanced at the black-haired youth supporting Hao Rui and narrowed his eyes disdainfully. Zhuowen's cultivation was clear as day in Zish Xinhan's eyes. He was merely an eternal overlord. In Zish Xinhan's opinion, trash like this could be squashed to death with a flick of his finger. He didn't need to care at all. On the other hand, Meng Tiangan, who was standing behind Zish Xinhan, frowned the moment he saw Zhuowen. He'd clearly sent two of his subordinates to follow the youth closely. If there was a chance, he'd kill the brat immediately. In Meng Tiangan's opinion, this person had already been killed by his two subordinates, so he didn't care that his two subordinates hadn't returned. But now, Meng Tiangan saw that Zhuowen had returned, but his two subordinates had disappeared. He knew that his two subordinates wouldn't be able to return. They must have been killed by this kid. How did this little bastard manage to kill two early-stage lords of creation? Meng Tiangan didn't understand. How could a mere eternal overlord kill two early-stage creators? Moreover, not a single rumor had leaked out. It was obvious that his two subordinates had been killed in a short period of time, so no one had noticed. Of course, what puzzled Meng Tiangan even more was that Gu Wen's giant whale phantom hadn't been able to kill this person. Meng Tiangan naturally did not believe that Zhuowen was the one who dealt with the giant whale phantom. He subconsciously thought that Zhuowen must have a protective treasure that Mei Ying left for him, which was why he was able to avoid the calamity just now. Who are you? Gu Wen walked forward and blocked Zhuowen's path. Zhuowen looked up at Gu Wen and said indifferently, "Who are you? Why are you blocking my path?" Gu Wen sneered. His eyes filled with arrogance as he pointed at Hao Rui, who was being supported by Zhuowen, and said, "This person has a life and death battle with me. In order to determine life and death, this battle has yet to end. Don't you think it's a bit too much for you to interfere? Also, this is the City Lord's manor of Dark Rock Divine City. Who do you think you are? How dare you barge into the City Lord's manor? Do you really want to die? Immortal Master Zhua, this person is called Gu Wen. He is the #1 genius of Dark Rock Divine City. Although he isn't a genius of the 10 major tribes, he is a powerful mutant. His talent and strength are both terrifying." Hao Rui's face was pale as he spoke. "Oh, so it's the #1 genius of Dark Rock Divine City. I've never heard of you." Zhuowen nodded and waved his hand impatiently at Gu Wen. "If you don't have anything else to say, then scram. Don't block my path. You're courting death." Gu Wen was enraged. His pride was even greater than Hao Rui's. Moreover, he'd completely crushed Hao Rui in the battle just now. His pride had grown even stronger. Now, a mere eternal overlord and actually dared to clamor and tell him to scram in front of him. How could Gu Wen tolerate this? At this moment, Gwyn acted. Gu Wen's right foot stomped forward, his powerful aura locking onto Zhuo Wen. He didn't conceal the killing intent in his eyes. Zhuo Wen glanced indifferently at Gwyn, his footsteps not stopping at all as he continued forward. I say, it's best if you don't attack. Otherwise, I can't guarantee your safety. Zhuo Wen's voice was cold, with a hint of hoarseness. Gu Wen felt a sudden chill, but he quickly came to his senses. He was inwardly annoyed that he'd been frightened by a mere eternal overlord. A mere eternal overlord trash dares to be so arrogant in front of me? I'd like to see how you'll threaten my life today. Gu Wen attacked. His right hand moved like lightning, grabbing at Zhuo Wen's head. His strength was great, and as his 5 claws opened and closed, crackling sounds could be heard. The spectators had no doubt that Gu Wen's claw could completely crush Zhuo Wen's head. Zhuo Wen's gaze was as calm as an ancient well. His left hand was still supporting Hao Rui, and he didn't slow down in the slightest. Idiot, you're simply courting death. When Gu Wen saw that Zhuo Wen didn't even pause, a sinister smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. His claw suddenly sped up. When Gwyn's claw was almost within reach, Zhuo Wen lightly punched out, hitting Gwyn's claw. You're really courting death. An eternal overlord ant dares to clash head-on with Gu Wen. Meng Tiangong sneered and couldn't help but mock. Ziju Xinhan frowned, sensing that something wasn't right. He'd repeatedly checked the black-haired youth's cultivation and confirmed that he was indeed an eternal overlord. However, the black-haired youth was too calm, so calm that it was frightening. This puzzled Ziju Xinhan. How could an eternal overlord be so calm in the face of an initial creation lord? Even when Gu Wen had exploded with power, this brat was still so calm and had chosen to meet him head-on. Although Ziju Xinhan was puzzled, he didn't think too much about it. He knew that there was no suspense in the outcome of this clash. The black-haired youth was undoubtedly going to lose. Crack! Suddenly, the crisp sound of bones breaking rang out, followed closely by a miserable scream. Ziju Xinhan smiled, faintly. He knew that the black-haired youth had been crippled, but he quickly realized that something was wrong. The surroundings were too quiet. His gaze fell forward, and he discovered that the black-haired youth was still as unmoving as a mountain, still supporting Hao Rui. The imposing Gwyn was clutching his deformed right arm and rolling on the ground. Mournful screams continuously rang out from Gwyn's mouth. Chapter 3166. Arrogant Ziju Xinhan's face stiffened, and the sneer on Meng Tiangong's lips froze. The other higher-ups of Dark Rock City were all dumbfounded. Only Mei and Great Guardianing Jia remained calm. They had seen Zhuo Wen's abnormal strength, which was far beyond his cultivation level. Therefore, they were not surprised that Zhuo Wen had crippled Gu Wen's right arm with one punch. Following that, Zhuo Wen's actions caused everyone's eyeballs to pop out. Zhuo Wen supported Hao Rui as they slowly walked forward. Gu Wen was holding his right arm and groaning in pain as he blocked Zhuo Wen's path. Get lost! Zhuo Wen kicked Gwyn in the chest. The powerful force caused Gwyn to fly back, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Bang! Gu Wen crashed to the ground, his body twitching and his eyes rolling back. He was in a very bad state. Meng Tiangong could not bear to watch any longer. He walked down the corridor toward Zhuo Wen and said coldly, Zhuo Wen, how dare you hit Gu Wen so hard? Are you an idiot? Just now, it was clearly Gu Wen who attacked me. I was just defending myself. I say, Great Protector Meng, are your parents blind? Zhuo Wen retorted indifferently. His footsteps did not stop as he continued walking toward the corridor, ignoring Meng Tiangong. Zhuo Wen, I've already warned you. But you didn't recognize my good intentions and even insulted me. You were in the wrong today. I have no choice but to teach you a lesson, Meng Tiangong said righteously, but the murderous intent in his eyes was undisguised. Mei Ying was trembling with anger. She said coldly, "Great Guardian Meng, are you looking down on me?" Gu Wen attacked Zhuowen. I didn't say anything because he was a junior. However, as a senior, you actually want to attack Zhuowen. Do you have any shame? Meng Tiangong was not ashamed at all. He cupped his fists at Mei Ying and said, "City Lord Mei Ying, I respect you very much, but I also have my own principles and rules. This Zhuowen has a close relationship with you. However, once you enter the Dark Rock Divine City, you will have to abide by the rules. Since I am his elder, he should not have offended me. However, since he has offended me, he must bear the corresponding consequences. I only made a move to teach him what to do and what not to do in the future." With that, Meng Tiangong ignored Mei Ying and strode towards Zhuowen. Meng Tiangong's aura also became more and more powerful as he moved forward. Meng Tiangong's cultivation base was the same as Great Protector Ying Jie's. They were both at the peak of the half-step Heaven's Ascension realm. In Dark Rock Divine City, Meng Tiangong was an expert second only to Zizi Xinhan. His status was very high. Zizi Xinhan's eyes flashed as he watched this scene. Surprisingly, he didn't say anything to stop Meng Tiangong. Instead, he watched silently. "Old dog Meng, you're really thick-skinned. You're clearly bullying the weak, yet you can still make it sound so dignified. I really admire your shamelessness." Zhuowen stopped and placed Hao Rui to the side. He walked up to Meng Tiangong and continued, "Old dog Meng, do you dare fight me to the death?" Meng Tiangong was furious. This Zhuowen kept calling him Old Dog Meng, which made him furious. However, when he heard that Zhuowen wanted to fight him to the death, he almost thought that he'd heard wrong. The upper echelons of Dark Rock Divine City in the corridor were also in an uproar. They found it unbelievable. This young man, who was only an eternal overlord, was too arrogant. It was fine if he didn't take Gu Wen seriously. After all, the gap between Gu Wen and Meng Tiangong was very large. However, this guy didn't even take Meng Tiangong seriously and actually said that he wanted to fight him to the death. Was this guy seriously courting death? Is there something wrong with this guy's head? Gu Wen came to his senses and clutched his chest. As soon as he came back to his senses, he heard Zhuowen's unbelievably arrogant words. His expression became extremely strange. The strength that Zhuowen had displayed just now had made Gu Wen feel a lingering fear. However, he knew that this kid wasn't at the level of a half-step ascendant overlord. This kid was simply courting death by fighting Meng Tiangong. Of course, Gu Wen was still a little delighted to hear that Zhuowen wanted to fight Meng Tiangong to the death. Zhuowen had almost crippled him. Gu Wen's resentment was difficult to describe. He couldn't wait to beat up Zhuowen again. However, he also knew that he wasn't Zhuowen's match. Now that Meng Tiangong had stood up for him, he knew that he had a chance to get his revenge. He wanted to personally see Zhuowen being killed by Meng Tiangong. "You want to fight me to the death?" Meng Tiangong was a little surprised. He was truly stunned. No matter how strong this Zhuowen was, he was still only an eternal overlord. How could he challenge him? Zizi Xinhan was also a little dazed, but soon a playful smile appeared on his lips. This black-haired youth was very interesting. He was so arrogant that he'd almost crippled Gu Wen as soon as he'd arrived. Now, he wanted to fight Meng Tiangong to the death. He didn't put him, the City Lord of Dark Rock Divine City, in his eyes at all. However, Zizi Xinhan wasn't angry. Instead, he felt a little pity for Zhuowen. In his opinion, This kid was definitely a proud and arrogant person who relied on his own talent. He didn't even know his own worth. He knew that this kind of person wouldn't live long. This life and death challenge was this kid's decision to court death. Mei Ying, this kid should be a genius of your Hongxian Divine City. Protector Meng only wanted to teach him a small lesson, but this kid is so arrogant that he wants to fight to the death. I can't stop him even if I want to. Ziju Xinhan turned to Mei Ying with a trace of pride in his voice. Mei Ying's face was gloomy, but she didn't say anything. In Ziju Xinhan's opinion, Mei Ying's expression was one of helplessness and sorrow. This made him even more proud. I think there's something wrong with your ears. Don't you understand the meaning of a life and death challenge? Zhuowen's expression was full of impatience. He looked at Meng Tiangan as if he was looking at an idiot. Meng Tiangan couldn't stand Zhuowen's gaze. He was flustered and exasperated. Good. You have guts to fight to the death with me. You really don't know how to write the word death. As he spoke, Meng Tiangan cupped his hands to Ziju Xinhan and asked for instructions. City Lord, this kid not only offended his superiors and didn't follow the rules, but also provoked me. Please allow me to fight to the death with him. Ziju Xinhan smiled slightly, then looked at Mei Ying and said, Mei Ying, this matter wasn't started by Protector Meng, but by your people. You're not allowed to fight in this life and death challenge. Mei Ying still didn't say anything. Her brows were tightly knitted, and her lips were tightly pursed. Her expression wasn't good. When Ziju Xinhan saw Mei Ying's expression, the pride in his eyes became even stronger. Protector Meng, I allow you to fight to the death. Ziju Xinhan said with a smile. Meng Tiangan was overjoyed. He immediately turned around and looked at Zhuowen. His eyes were full of contempt as he said, Your cultivation is not high, so I won't bully you. I'll give you 3 moves first. Chapter 31:67. 10 Direction Flood Dragon, Long Tian Slaughter Profound. As soon as Zhuowen said this, Gu Wen, who was about to leave the open space and head to the corridor, stiffened and looked at Zhuowen strangely. This guy must be crazy. Gu Wen was very sure that Zhuowen was a complete madman. He had thought that this guy was crazy enough to challenge Meng Tiangan, but this guy actually planned to fight 1 against 2, challenging him and Meng Tiangan at the same time. Everyone in the corridor was also stunned, looking at Zhuowen as if they were looking at an idiot. Interesting, Ziju Xinhan's lips curled into a sinister smile, looking at Zhuowen with even more pity. It seemed that this guy was not only arrogant, but also brainless. Meng Tiangan looked coldly at Zhuowen, the veins on his forehead bulging. He was extremely angry. This guy was looking down on him, actually planning to deal with him and Gu Wen at the same time. What do you mean? Meng Tiangan gasped for breath, looking coldly at Zhuowen. He was angry. You're not enough. Zhuowen looked indifferently at Meng Tiangan, then said to Gu Wen, Your life and death battle is not over yet, so why don't you get over here? Of course, if you're scared, you can go back. I won't stop you. Gu Wen was furious, rushing to Meng Tiangan's side. He coldly stared at Zhuowen and said, Little bastard, do you really think that you're invincible just because you caught me off guard and forced me to retreat? I don't know if I'm invincible, but I know that you've been trampled under my feet, and I've trampled a little too hard. That's all I need to know. Zhuowen said indifferently, You're courting death. Gu Wen was unable to restrain his anger, and a terrifying aura erupted. Then, in the void behind him, an extremely powerful energy surged out, forming a huge phantom of a whale. It was Gu Wen's innate ability. Meng Tiangan held Gu Wen down, and the latter calmed down a little. Meng Tiangan said, Gu Wen, you don't need to make a move. Just follow behind me. I will make him pay the price for his arrogance. After saying that, Meng Tiangong slowly walked towards Zhuowen. The aura of a half-step master of heaven ascension suddenly erupted. Guwen calmed down completely and slowly followed behind Meng Tiangong. In the exchange of blows just now, Guwen also knew how terrifying this black-haired youth was. Even if he used his innate ability, he probably wouldn't be able to kill him. However, with Meng Tian's help, this matter would become very simple. This kid would definitely die. 10 directions, flood dragon, Long Tian's slaughter profound. Meng Tiangong's footsteps became faster and faster. Violent energy swirled around his body, forming invisible waves one after another. When Meng Tiangong arrived in front of Zhuowen, with him as the center, 10 waves suddenly rushed out and soared into the sky. Every wave seemed to be able to rush to the limit of the sky. After that, the 10 waves splashed out countless water droplets that rained down like a violent storm. Amidst the countless water droplets, 10 enormous and ferocious flood dragons swooped down. Their target was Zhuowen, who was at the center. Zhuowen put his palms together. His entire body emitted a crystalline light. With a stomp of his right foot, the entire ground shook. Facing a half-step master of heaven ascension like Meng Tiangong, Zhuowen didn't dare to be careless. Back when he was at the gates of Hongxian Divine City, he had fought with great guardian Yingjia, who was also a half-step master of heaven ascension. Although he had defeated great guardian Yingjia in the end, that was because great guardian Yingjia wasn't in Hongxian Divine City and couldn't absorb heavenly energy to replenish himself. If great guardian Yingjia was in an environment where heavenly energy was abundant, he would be at a disadvantage. Of course, it was impossible for a half-step master of heaven ascension to defeat the current him. Moreover, Zhuowen had already grasped all of the formations and restrictions within Dark Rock Divine City in his hands. The formations and restrictions within the City Lord's Manor were the most concentrated. Before entering the City Lord's Manor, he had already deciphered the formations within. Before entering the City Lord's Manor, Zhuowen had already destroyed the foundation of the formation that supplied the entire Divine City with heavenly energy. Of course, he had done it very cleverly. The God Masters within the Divine City didn't notice it. It wouldn't be long before the heavenly Tao energy within Dark Rock Divine City dwindled until it completely dissipated. What he needed to do now was to stall for time. However, once the heavenly energy within Dark Rock Divine City completely collapsed, it would be time for him to counterattack. Bang! 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 The 10 flood dragons charged forward rapidly. Zhuowen's body was as fast as lightning as he dodged between the 10 flood dragons. One of the flood dragons took the opportunity to open its bloody mouth and swallow Zhuowen. This flood dragon was too fast. Zhuowen couldn't dodge in time and was forced to punch out. Boom! The powerful force was like the explosion of the 9 heavens' profound thunder. The flood dragon's huge head was directly smashed into dust by Zhuowen's punch. The moment this flood dragon was destroyed, the other 9 flood dragons took the opportunity to charge towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he executed the tyrannical Tao slaughtering art. He executed the 3 major moves of the slaughtering Tao finger, slaughtering Tao palm, and slaughtering Tao hand. The 3 major moves swept across the sky and landed on the flood dragon in front of them. The flood dragon was instantly reduced to nothingness. At the same time, Zhuowen formed hand seals with both hands and executed the sky-splitting blade esoteric art. He pinched the void with both hands, and 2 bright white air blades that were several feet long exploded with a terrifying aura. The moment he executed the sky-splitting blade esoteric art, he also imbued the destruction of heaven and earth annihilation onto the 2 sky-splitting blade esoteric art, causing the power of the 2 sky-splitting blade esoteric art to increase exponentially. A long purple river floated from the void behind Zhuowen as he executed the space-time divine art, Destiny Space-Time Kill. Zhuowen stepped on the long purple river, and his figure became ethereal in the space-time. He was like a ghost and easily avoided the pincer attack of the remaining 8 flood dragons. Zhuowen appeared on the back of a flood dragon like a ghost and chopped off the head of the flood dragon with the sky-splitting blade esoteric art in his right hand. The terrifying destruction power invaded the flood dragon's body, causing it to roar at the sky, and its huge body to explode into a bloody mist. The moment the flood dragon was destroyed, the long purple river wrapped around Zhuowen and caused him to disappear from the spot in an instant. The other flood dragon wanted to sneak attack Zhuowen from behind, but unfortunately, it missed. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Surrounded by the flood dragons, Zhuowen leisurely stepped on the long purple river, and his figure flickered like a ghost. Every time Zhuowen flickered, he would be able to destroy a flood dragon with his fierce attacks. When Zhuowen chopped off the head of the last flood dragon, the surrounding water pillars exploded into countless water droplets. Zhuowen was submerged in the water curtain, and he slowly walked out. The purple river surrounded him, making him look like a god descending into the world. Old Dog Meng, come and die. Chapter 3168. Golden Armor. Race Meng Tiangong was shocked. His attack was easily broken by this guy. This guy's strength was somewhat beyond his expectations. However, seeing Zhuowen rushing over, Meng Tiangong's eyes darkened. He pulled out the long sword at his waist and stepped forward to fight with Zhuowen. The long sword in Meng Tiangong's hand was made of bronze. The surface of the bronze sword shone with a bronze light. Unfortunately, it was not destined to be a divine weapon. It was just an ordinary item. Meng Tiangong had just raised his sword when he was cut in half by Zhuowen's sky-splitting blade. Meng Tiangong reacted quickly. He quickly retreated and avoided the bombardment of the sky-splitting blade to avoid being cut in half. Zhuowen followed closely behind. The sky-splitting blade in his hand danced like lightning. The sky-splitting blade attacked Meng Tiangong's life points in an extremely tricky manner. Meng Tiangong's eyes were gloomy. Violent energy surrounded his body and resisted the sky-splitting blade. However, from Meng Tiangong's somewhat strenuous performance, Zhuowen could see that it was difficult for Meng Tiangong to resist the sky-splitting blade. One had to know that the power of the sky-splitting blade was no weaker than a divine weapon of the creation level. Moreover, the power of this profound meaning increased with the improvement of Zhuowen's Panga sacred body. Meng Tiangong could not open a spatial divine weapon. He did not have a suitable divine weapon in his hand. Against Zhuowen, who used the sky-splitting blade, Meng Tiangong was undoubtedly at a disadvantage. In the corridor, the great guardian Ingjia's eyes twitched slightly when he saw Zhuowen use the powerful sky-splitting blade. When he fought with Zhuowen, Zhuowen did not seem to use such a powerful move, but he still defeated him. He had no doubt that if Zhuowen had used the sky-splitting blade at that time, he would have lost and even lost his life. Meng Tiangong's face was ugly. The sky-splitting blade, combined with the death of heaven and earth, was too destructive. Every time he resisted, he had to use all his strength. The heavenly energy in his body was also consumed at an extremely fast speed. Meng Tiangong didn't know if it was an illusion, but he realized that the heavenly Tao energy in the city lord's mansion had become thinner than before. He furiously absorbed the heavenly Tao energy and realized that the heavenly Tao energy in his body was recovering at a much slower rate than before. Bang! Just as Meng Tiangong was in a daze, Zhuowen found a flaw and kicked Meng Tiangong's face. Meng Tiangong's attention was all on the sky-splitting blades in Zhuowen's hands. He didn't notice Zhuowen's whip kick at all, and was directly kicked by Zhuowen's whip kick. Meng Tiangong fell to the ground, spitting out broken teeth, mixed with blood. However, his reaction was very fast. He immediately did a wild donkey roll and barely dodged Zhuowen's next attack. Zhuowen stomped on the ground with his right foot, and the purple river revolved around his feet as he teleported away. Boom! Zhuowen appeared behind Meng Tiangong and slashed out with the sky-opening blade. Meng Tiangong's forehead was covered in cold sweat. With a loud roar, the clothes on his body were torn to shreds, revealing his body covered in golden scales. At that moment, the surface of the golden scales lit up with complicated patterns. Then they grew densely and crazily, covering Meng Tiangong's entire body. Bang! The sky-splitting blade slashed Meng Tiangong's back, creating a large number of sparks. At the same time, it was accompanied by the crisp sound of metal clashing. Meng Tiangong was sent flying, but Zhuowen frowned slightly. This was because he realized that when the sky-splitting blade slashed the golden scales on Meng Tiangong's back, it only left a faint white mark. Even with the sharpness of the sky-splitting blade, it couldn't cut open the golden scales on Meng Tiangong's body. At that moment, Meng Tiangong's form had changed greatly. He was no longer in human form. Instead, he looked like an enlarged version of a pangolin. He actually forced Guardian Meng to reveal his true form. This guy, in the corridor, many higher-ups of Dark Rock Divine City looked at this scene in shock. It's actually the Golden Armor race. Meng also noticed Meng Tiangong, who had revealed his true form, and frowned slightly. The Golden Armor race was very famous in the Eldritch domain. Although it wasn't as famous as the top 10 races, it was still a famous race. In particular, the golden armor that covered the Golden Armor race's body had extremely terrifying defensive power. The experts of the Golden Armor race weren't necessarily very strong, but their defensive power was outstanding among the many races in the Eldritch domain. Ziju Xinhan frowned slightly. He didn't expect Zhuowen to be able to force Meng Tiangong to this extent. However, he also knew that Meng Tiangong's true form had been exposed, and his defensive power had reached an extremely troublesome level. Even he would have to spend a lot of effort to break through Meng Tiangong's defense. No matter how strong Zhuowen was, he was afraid that he would be in trouble soon. Bang! 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 Meng Tiangong roared and turned into a golden shadow, rushing wildly toward Zhuowen. Strong winds swept around him, and space collapsed and collapsed. Zhuowen quickly slashed out the sky-splitting blade with both hands. Endless blade, qi exploded and blasted on Meng Tiangong's body. Meng Tiangong didn't dodge and directly rushed toward the blade qi. The blade qi only left faint white marks on the surface of Meng Tiangong's golden scales. Meng Tiangong tore through all the blade qi and punched toward Zhuowen. He actually smashed the sky-splitting blade in Zhuowen's hand into pieces. "You're dead." Meng Tiangong's eyes were ferocious. In his opinion, Zhuowen was already at his wit's end. Zhuowen's eyes were calm. He stomped his right foot and quickly retreated. "Let's see where you can retreat to." The ferocious look in Meng Tiangong's eyes became more and more intense. He chased closely after Zhuowen, and the golden scales on his body emitted an extremely dazzling light. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the long purple river swept toward Meng Tiangong. The long purple river contained the power of destiny, space, and space. Meng Tiangong only felt that the space around him had stagnated, and his speed of advancement was immediately reduced. In particular, the long purple river was actually faintly affecting his destiny. This made Meng Tiangong a little shocked. Fortunately, this strange power didn't affect him much. He used his cultivation to forcibly suppress it. Zhuowen felt a little helpless. The power of the Destiny space-time kill was indeed terrifying. It could directly wipe out the destiny of an enemy. However, this was relative. If it were an ordinary Lord of Creation, the Destiny space-time kill would indeed be able to kill him. Unfortunately, Meng Tiangong wasn't an ordinary Lord of Creation. He was a half-step Lord of Heaven Ascension. He could forcibly suppress the influence of the Destiny space-time kill on his destiny. Of course, if Zhuowen's cultivation continued to increase, the power of the Destiny space-time kill would become even stronger. When that time came, it would be easy for him to kill Meng Tiangong. However, Zhuowen's main goal now was to slow down Meng Tiangong's speed. Whoosh! The long purple river instantly spread out. Soon after, the endless purple river spread across the entire open space. The surrounding people couldn't see anything in the long purple river. However, there was one exception. That was Guwen. Chapter 3169, edited by Mike. Your shrewdness. Guwen knelt on the ground, his entire body twitching, his expression sinister. The purple river did not affect Meng Tiangong too much, but it affected him greatly. In particular, the mysterious power within the purple river tightly gripped his fate, as if it would strangle it at any moment. Guwen knew that if he allowed his fate to be swept away by the purple river, he would undoubtedly die. The phantom of the giant whale descended and enveloped Guwen's body. The originally bitterly struggling Guwen was clearly in a much better state. However, it was still somewhat difficult for him to move within the purple river. It was as if his feet were filled with lead, and even lifting them was somewhat difficult. Suddenly, a shocking, murderous intent swept out from the depths of the purple river. This killing intent was truly too terrifying. Guwen could not help but kneel down, and with a roar, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Guwen's expression greatly changed. He raised his head with difficulty and looked towards the depths of the purple river. He saw Zhuowen standing firmly in the depths with a straight back. Zhuowen held a blood-red bow in his left hand, while a blood-red arrow was held in his right hand. He had placed it on the bowstring, and the bowstring had already been drawn to a full moon. And the shocking killing intent that Guwen felt came precisely from the blood-colored bow and divine arrow. Where did this guy get such a powerful divine bow and divine arrow? Could it be that he can use his spatial divine tool? Guwen thought of something and revealed a look of disbelief. In the massacre celestial domain, spatial divine tools could not be opened. This was a publicly acknowledged and ironclad rule. But could this black-haired youth in front of him have broken this ironclad rule? Meng Tiangong was stupefied. He had watched with his own eyes as Zhuowen took out the Hou-Yi divine bow and divine arrow from his large world. He simply could not understand how this Zhuowen could use his spatial divine tool. But after sensing that terrifying killing intent, Meng Tiangong's body trembled, and he immediately came to his senses. He knew that now was not the time to think about Zhuowen's spatial divine tool, but how to escape with his life. The threat from Hou-Yi's divine arrow was too great. He even had a feeling that if he was hit by this arrow, even if he didn't die, he would be half crippled. The consequences would be very serious. However, Meng Tiangong soon realized in despair that the purple river around him was affecting his movements too much. Being in the range of the purple river, it was very difficult for him to even lift his feet. Even if he tried his best, he could only jog slowly. Zhuowen looked at Meng Tiangong, who was slowly running away with a cold smile on his face. "Old dog Meng, don't even think about leaving today. Die here." Zhuowen released the bowstring, and the Hou-Yi divine arrow turned into a sharp beam of bloody light piercing through the air and into Meng Tiangong's body. Meng Tiangong's proud golden scales were like paper in front of the Hou-Yi divine arrow, instantly shattering into dust. The Hou-Yi divine arrow pierced through Meng Tiangan's body. The terrifying killing intent invaded Meng Tiangan's body and exploded like countless bombs. Meng Tiangan's entire body exploded into a bloody mist. Bang! After piercing through Meng Tiangan, the Hou-Yi divine arrow stabbed into the ground, not far from Guwen. A terrifying killing intent swept out like countless blades, all of which invaded Guwen's body. Guwen raised his head to the sky and screamed. He did his best to stimulate the energy in his body, wanting to resist this shocking killing intent. Puchi! Guwen's limbs exploded. He burned his essence blood and erupted with his strongest power, flying backwards. Rumble! The purple river collapsed with a loud bang, and Guwen, who had lost his limbs, was sent flying backwards, his back heavily smashing into the corridor behind him. Zish Xinhan's expression changed slightly. He took a step forward and grabbed Guwen with his right hand. When he saw that Guwen had lost his limbs and was on the verge of death, and that his cultivation had been crippled, the anger in his eyes rose to the extreme. Guwen was a rare variant and the #1 genius of Dark Rock City. Now that he had become a cripple, it was no different from being dead. How could Zish Xinhan not be angry? When Zish Xinhan's gaze fell on the ground, searching for Meng Tiangan's figure, he discovered that apart from Zhuowen, there was only a very obvious pool of blood on the ground. "Where's Protector Meng?" Zish Xinhan asked coldly, staring fixedly at Zhuowen, who was holding the Hou-Yi divine bow. Zhuowen slowly walked to the ground where the Hou-Yi divine arrow had been stabbed, pulled it out, and pointed at the pool of blood behind him. "Your Protector Meng is over there. You killed him." Zish Xinhan was so furious that he couldn't control his killing intent. He glared at Zhuowen. The upper echelons of Dark Rock City also looked at Zhuowen with hostility, but they were even more shocked. This eternal overlord youth was too strange. He'd even killed Meng Tiangan. Everyone was very curious as to what exactly had happened in the Purple River just now. In just a short moment, Meng Tiangan had died without an intact corpse, and Guwen had become a useless cripple. Dark Rock City Lord, this is a battle of life and death. Life and death are up to the heavens. I won this battle, so Meng Tiangan and Guwen should die. Zhuowen didn't seem to notice the killing intent in Zish Xinhan's eyes. Instead, he slowly walked to Mei Ying's side and glanced sideways at the unconscious Guwen in Zish Xinhan's hand. "Right, Guwen is completely crippled. According to the rules of a battle of life and death, I should take his life. However, I'm merciful and can let him go." Zhuowen's lips curled into a mocking smile, while Zish Xinhan's expression darkened. Puchi! A terrifying power exploded from Zish Xinhan's hand. Guwen didn't even have time to groan before he was completely killed. This little brother is right. Since it's a battle of life and death, we naturally have to abide by the rules. Protector Meng and Guwen both lost, so they deserve to die. Our banquet isn't over yet. Mei, you didn't even introduce us before. Your Hongxian Divine City actually has such a powerful genius. You really hid it from me for a long time. This time, I'll punish you with a few cups of wine. Zish Xinhan was all smiles. The killing intent on his body was completely restrained, as if nothing had happened. Zhuowen looked deeply at Zish Xinhan, but he was very vigilant in his heart. This Zish Xinhan was very shrewd. He was actually able to swallow his anger just like that. This guy wasn't easy to deal with. Mei didn't pay any attention to Zish Xinhan. Instead, she glanced at Zhuowen. Seeing the latter nod his head, she let out a sigh of relief. She understood that Zhuowen should have already settled the matter they agreed on. Mei originally wanted to refuse Zish Xinhan's invitation and immediately leave. However, Zhuowen was one step ahead of her. He smiled and said, "The Dark Rock City Lord is too polite. Since you're so enthusiastic, it's not good for us to refuse." Zhuowen chuckled and gave Mei Ying a look. He took the lead and entered the hall. Mei Ying was a little anxious, but she was embarrassed to tell Zhuowen to leave in front of Zish Xinhan. She knew that Zhuowen had his own reasons for doing so. Chapter 3170. Killing Array after everyone was seated. Zish Xinhan was beaming with joy. He didn't seem to be in a bad mood because of Meng Tiangan and Gu Wen's deaths. After Zhuowen sat down, he immediately noticed that Mei Su and Jiang Yi, who were sitting beside Mei Ying, were in a daze, and their eyes were unfocused. He asked Mei Ying in a low voice and found out that Mei Su and Jiang Yi had been poisoned by Zish Xinhan with the soul-devouring parasite. Zhuowen naturally didn't know about the soul-devouring parasite, but after Mei Ying's explanation, he narrowed his eyes and looked at Zish Xinhan with hostility. But soon, Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he sensed that the grand array of Dark Rock Divine City was being activated. It was obvious that the formation Tao Master of Dark Rock Divine City had begun to move, and the only formation Tao Master who could activate Dark Rock Divine City was Zish Xinhan. It was no wonder that Zish Xinhan had acted out of character and swallowed his anger. It turned out that Zish Xinhan had planned to keep them here to stall for time, while he secretly activated the grand arrays of Divine City for the formation Tao Master in the city. The fluctuations of the grand arrays were like invisible ripples that spread throughout the city, attracting the attention of countless cultivators. Mei Ying, Great Guardian Ingjia, and the others in the hall were shocked and couldn't help but stand up. Mei Ying looked at Zhuo, one in confusion. His eyes filled with confusion. Didn't Zhuowen say that everything was taken care of? How could the grand arrays of Dark Rock Divine City be activated now? Moreover, from the fluctuations of the grand arrays, Mei Ying knew that there were more than a few grand arrays activated in the city. There were more than 10 of them. This was almost all of the grand arrays of Dark Rock Divine City. Boom! In the hall, there were flashes of light. A killing array hidden in the City Lord's mansion had been completely activated. A terrifying killing intent filled the entire hall. Zish Xinhan, what is the meaning of this? Mei Ying stood up and glared at Zish Xinhan as she said in a deep voice. Zish Xinhan smiled and said, "Mei Ying, do you really think that the people of Dark Rock Divine City are so easy to kill? Moreover, the people you killed were my great guardian and the most outstanding genius. Today, I will make you pay with your blood. Of course, Mei Ying, if you agree to marry me, hand this little bastard over to me and compensate me with 10 million jade stones. I'll consider letting you go." The calm expression on Zish Xinhan's face had long since disappeared. Instead, he looked at Zhuowen, who was standing beside Mei Ying with a ferocious expression. 10 million jade stones. Mei Ying's pretty face changed slightly, not to mention that she did not have so many jade stones. Even if she did, she would not take them out. However, right now, Mei Ying wanted to have a good talk with Zhuowen. Clearly, they had already discussed that she would enter the City Lord's mansion and be responsible for attracting Zish Xinhan's attention. As for Zhuowen, he acted alone and secretly destroyed all the Grand Array foundations within Dark Rock Divine City. Moreover, when Zhuowen returned, she had already given Zhuowen a corresponding look. Zhuowen had also nodded, indicating that he had indeed completed the task. However, now that all the Grand Arrays within Dark Rock Divine City had been activated, this meant that Zhuowen did not follow the agreement and destroy the Grand Array foundations within Dark Rock Divine City. "Zhuowen, you owe me an explanation." Mei Ying's beautiful eyes stared coldly at Zhuowen, Great Guardian Ingjia, and the Dragon Race Youth. How Rue also looked at Zhuowen in disbelief. At this critical juncture, This Zhuowen had actually lied to her. City Lord Meiying, you will know what's going on very soon. As long as you trust me, I will be able to smoothly bring you out of Dark Rock Divine City. I can even help you seize the Dark Rock Divine City. Zhuowen stood proudly, exuding unprecedented confidence. Meiying frowned slightly. She did not know where Zhuowen's confidence came from to actually threaten to seize the Dark Rock Divine City for her. What's more, they were now trapped in a powerful killing array. They couldn't even get out. Moreover, Zish Xinhan and the entire Dark Rock Divine City would not let them off. I think you're crazy. How can you say such arrogant words? You must be living in a dream. Zish Xinhan looked coldly at Zhuowen, the corners of his mouth curling into a mocking smile. Zhuowen did not say anything else. He took out an array flag and threw it out. Instantly, the grand array around the hall trembled violently. Then, the flowing light on the surface of the array blazed like a rising sun. In an instant, the grand array around the hall's power increased by hundreds and thousands of times in a short period of time. At the same time, the Array Dao Divine Masters in charge of the various grand arrays within Dark Rock Divine City were shocked to discover that the energy of the grand arrays they were in charge of was rapidly weakening. Then, they discovered that other than the killing array in the City Lord's mansion that was becoming increasingly powerful, the grand arrays in the other places were gradually weakening. It was as if the killing array in the City Lord's mansion was constantly absorbing the power of the grand arrays in other places. While the grand arrays in other places were collapsing due to the depletion of energy, the killing array above the City Lord's mansion had reached its most terrifying state. An intense blood-red light rushed towards the horizon, almost dyeing the entire sky of Dark Rock Divine City blood-red. What's going on? Did something happen in the City Lord's mansion? Inside the city, many foreign race experts raised their heads and looked at the blood-red light with fear in their eyes, especially the killing intent emanating from the killing array. It was simply too terrifying. It made them feel an oppressive feeling that made them want to kneel down and submit, not daring to resist. At this moment, inside the City Lord's mansion, Zish Xinhan and many other higher-ups were looking at the killing array in disbelief. At this moment, the killing array's power had reached a level that made their hearts palpitate. Even Zish Xinhan felt a trace of fear rising in his heart, because he discovered that the killing array in the City Lord's mansion seemed to have surpassed the creation grade. Could it be a piercing heaven-grade killing array? But how was that possible? He clearly remembered that the killing array in the City Lord's mansion had only barely reached the creation grade. This was something that the Divine Array Masters of the Divine City had worked together and spent countless years to set up. But now, this killing array had actually reached the piercing heaven grade. What exactly was going on? What's going on? Why is the killing array attacking us? Suddenly, Zish Xinhan discovered that several higher-ups of the Divine City were struck by several blood-red whirlpools. They screamed and died on the spot. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, Zish Xinhan sensed that something was wrong. His right foot kicked off, and he flew downwards. He saw several blood-red whirlpools appearing at the place where he had been standing. They were extremely sharp. Zish Xinhan's face was gloomy, and his eyes were filled with uncertainty. Why would the killing array in his City Lord's mansion attack them? However, Zish Xinhan seemed to have realized something and couldn't help looking at Zhuowen. Chapter 3171. Joining forces to kill The screams continued. Inside the hall, the higher-ups of Dark Rock Divine City struggled to resist the blood-colored whirlpool within the killing formation. Gradually, they were unable to resist the blood-colored whirlpool. Their bodies exploded into bloody mists as they completely died. Zish Shinhan dodged the countless blood-colored whirlpools around him. His face turned gloomy and ugly as he watched his subordinates dwindle. He stared coldly at Zhuowen and the others who were not affected by the killing array. His eyes widened as he asked in a low voice, "Did you tamper with the array?" Zhuowen stood where he was and glanced at Zish Shinhan from the corner of his eyes. He mocked, "What do you think?" Zish Shinhan's eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent. At the same time, he was shocked. The number of arrays in Dark Rock Divine City was complex, and the array bases were scattered in every corner of the city. It was not easy to find all of them. Needless to say, after finding these great arrays, he actually changed them and took control of them. What kind of powerful array, Dao level, did he have to be to do this? Whoosh! When he thought that Zhuowen might be a high-level array Dao master, the killing intent in Zish Shinhan's eyes became more and more terrifying. He stomped his right foot, and the aura of a mid-stage, heaven-piercing master poured out of his body. In an instant, the killing array in the surroundings was heavily shaken by this powerful aura. With a wave of his sleeve, Zhuowen took out several beast bone formation discs. Instantly, the vortexes within the killing formation reached a terrifying level and, densely packed together, converged towards Zish Shinhan. Zish Shinhan frowned slightly. He could only passively resist these terrifying killing intent whirlpools. Zhuowen pulled Mei Ying and the others out of the range of the killing array. "Damn it! Little bastard, wait until I leave this array. I will definitely not let you go. I will pull out your tendons and peel off your bones. I will not let you live." Zish Shinhan's resentful roar came from within the killing array. Originally, he had activated the array to exterminate everyone in Hongxian Divine City, but now he was trapped in the killing array in the City Lord's mansion. "Immortal Master Zhua, do you control all the arrays in Dark Rock Divine City?" Mei Ying stared blankly at the terrifying killing array in front of her. When she regained her senses, she looked at Zhuowen with a complicated expression. "More or less." Zhuowen nodded casually. The formations in Dark Rock Divine City were basically all at the Genesis level. For a heaven-piercing divine formation master like him, breaking them was simply too easy. "Immortal Master, Zhua, I misunderstood you just now. I hope you don't take it to heart." Mei Ying looked at Zhuowen cautiously. Now, she was certain that Zhuowen had not lied to her. Zhuowen was really a Heaven Ascension Master. A divine formation master of this level had an extremely high status in the Xian Mi Heavenly Domain and the primitive Heavenly Domain. He was an existence that was on the same level as the Master of Heaven Reaching. Such an existence was extremely popular no matter where it was. Mei Ying had no choice but to treat him with caution. Zhuowen could see through Mei Ying's thoughts. He waved his hand and said, "City Lord Mei Ying, you don't have to be so polite. In that kind of environment, it's normal for you to misunderstand. It's just that I didn't make it clear." Mei Ying saw that Zhuowen did not seem to care too much and felt a lot more relaxed. She immediately said with a smile of exultation, "Immortal Master Zhua, Zish Shinhan is now trapped in the killing array. Moreover, the formations in Dark Rock Divine City have all lost their effectiveness. This is a good opportunity for us to leave Dark Rock Divine City." Zhuowen shook his head. He looked at the killing array in front of him and said, "Why do we have to leave Dark Rock Divine City? We have basically wiped out the upper echelons of Dark Rock Divine City. Now, we just have to kill Zish Shinhan, and we can take over the city." Mei Ying looked at Zhuowen in shock. She had never thought of killing Zish Shinhan. In her mind, Zish Shinhan was a mid-stage skyspan lord. Even if she attacked with all her strength, she might not be able to defeat Zish Shinhan, let alone kill him. Moreover, Skyspan lords were exceedingly powerful and difficult to kill. City Lord Maying, let's do something big. Let's join forces to destroy Zish Shinhan and take over Dark Rock Divine City. In the future, your Hongxian Divine City will also be able to expand its influence. Zhuowen looked at Maying with bright eyes. Zhuowen's goal was naturally not to become the city lord of Dark Rock Divine City, but to obtain the jade or vein that Dark Rock Divine City controlled. The mysterious stone was too miraculous. He believed that as long as the stone absorbed enough jade, or it would once again enter a state of epiphany. At that time, it would not be impossible for his cultivation base to advance again. After all, his cultivation base had already reached the peak of the eternal overlord realm. He was only one step away from stepping into the first major realm of the third step of Dao validation. All he needed was an opportunity. In Zhuowen's opinion, this opportunity was the mysterious stone. Mei Ying looked hesitant. She glanced at Zhuowen and hesitated. She was well aware of Zish Shinhan's strength. Although the great array that Zhuowen had set up in the City Lord's mansion was indeed very powerful, it was still not enough to kill Zish Shinhan. City Lord Maying, if you are not willing to cooperate with me, I will go in myself. Zhuowen shook his head when he saw Mei Ying's hesitation. He did not intend to force her to make a decision. However, Zhuowen was a little uncertain. Although he had come into contact with mid-stage Skyspan lords, he had never fought with them. After all, when he had fought an early Lord Heavenspan expert, it had been a fight to the death, and he had almost died. Now that he was facing mid-stage Skyspan lords, even with this Skyspan killing array, Zhuowen felt that it would be difficult to defeat them. However, he had to take over Dark Rock Divine City. After all, he urgently needed a large amount of jade Oregon. He had to increase his strength a little. Maying called out to Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes were filled with determination as she said, "Immortal Master Zhua, I will go in with you. It was all thanks to you that we were able to escape this time. If you want me to stand by and do nothing, I really can't do it." Zhuowen heaved a sigh of relief. With Mei Ying's help, coupled with the killing array and his many trump cards, Zhuowen believed that there was a high chance that they could kill Zish Shinhan. Immortal Master Zhua, City Lord, be careful. Great Guardianing Jia and the Dragon Clan youth, Hao Rui, who were taking care of Mei Su and Jiang Yi, looked at Zhuowen and Mei Ying worriedly. Mei Ying nodded at the two of them and entered the killing array with Zhuowen. As soon as they entered the killing array, Zhuowen summoned the Beast Bone Array disc. Instantly, the entire killing array became violent. At this moment, only Zish Shinhan was left in the killing array. The rest of the people were all crushed by the killing array. Bastard, break the killing array if you have the ability. Fight with me. Zish Shinhan's eyes turned red when he saw Zhuowen and Mei Ying. He roared like a wild beast. The high-level experts of Dark Rock Divine City were all dead. This was a huge loss for Zish Shinhan. Chapter 3172. Original form, Idiot! Zhuowen's eyes were cold as he changed his hand seals. Instantly, the surrounding blood-colored vortexes became much more berserk and terrifying as they surged toward Zish Shinhan. Zish Shinhan roared in anger. His hands were like lightning as they poured out a torrent of violent energy. However, he was still in a sorry state as he tried to resist the suddenly berserk blood-colored vortexes. Just now, when Zhuowen entered the killing formation and appeared in front of him, he had already planned to use his full strength to charge at Zhuowen and get rid of Zhuowen in the shortest time possible. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had long since known Zish Shinhan's intentions. The moment he appeared in front of Zish Shinhan, he formed a hand seal and raised the killing formation's power to its peak. City Lord Mei Ying, I may have to rely on you now. The amount of energy consumed by this killing array is too terrifying. I have to maintain the base of this killing array. Zhuowen's gaze was grave as he sat cross-legged at the edge of the killing formation. With a wave of his sleeve, he took out piles of heavenly law origin crystals. The main source of energy for the killing formation in the City Lord's mansion came from the various large formation bases in Dark Rock Divine City. Moreover, Zhuowen had used his own array Dao to forcibly raise the level of this killing formation to the connecting heaven stage. The amount of energy it consumed was also terrifying. The moment Zhuowen entered the killing formation, he knew that the energy provided by the various large formation bases was about to be used up by the killing formation. According to his estimation, Zish Xinhan would be able to hold on for another 15 minutes before completely exhausting the killing formation and breaking out. Piles of heavenly law origin crystals were sent into the formation base by Zhuowen. Instantly, the weakened killing formation was strengthened once more. Zish Xinhan looked at Zhuowen in disbelief as he took out piles of heavenly law origin crystals. What was going on with this guy? Where did these heavenly law origin crystals come from? Could it be that this guy could open a spatial divine artifact? Ziju Xinhan thought of a possibility, and the shock in his heart couldn't be any greater. Ziju Xinhan finally understood where the blood-red bow in Zhuowen's hand came from when he killed Meng Tiangan. It was probably from his spatial artifact. The pressure emitted by the blood-red bow was ancient and vicissitudes of life. Even Ziche Xianhan felt a strong sense of crisis when he saw it for the first time. There was no doubt that the blood-colored bow was no ordinary bow. In fact, Ziju Xianhan was regretting making a move against Mei Ying and the others. He wasn't afraid of Mei Ying or the people from Hongxian Divine City. What he was afraid of was the black-haired youth who was sitting cross-legged at the edge of the killing array. This black-haired youth was truly too unfathomable. This fellow was not only a transcending heaven-grade array Dao master, but he also had so many hidden cards on him. This made Ziju Xinhan unable to see through this black-haired youth. However, there was no time for Ziche Xianhan to think too much. The killing array's power had increased, and endless blood-red vortexes were converging. Each of the vortexes rushed towards the vital points on Zhuowen's body. At the same time, Mei Ying was like a ghost, arriving not far away from Ziche Xianhan. Mei Ying's jade-like hand swept out, emitting a faint light. As if teleporting, it passed through the countless blood-red vortexes and blasted towards Ziche Xianhan's chest. Mei Ying used her strongest innate ability, the Soul Assault. She knew that this killing array consumed too much energy, and the longer it dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for them. Therefore, she wanted to end the battle quickly. Ziche Xianhan's face was gloomy. He roared, and his right hand formed into a claw and blasted towards Mei Ying. Waves of dense black qi poured out from his right claw, and a gloomy cold qi spread out from the black light. Bang! Ziche Xianhan and Mei Ying clashed head-on, and terrifying ripples spread out in all directions. The surrounding space exploded, forming countless Xiaohe holes. Mei Ying snorted and retreated, blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. Ziche Xianhan retreated half a step, but he was in a worse state than Mei Ying, because in the instant he and Mei Ying exchanged blows, he had revealed a flaw. The surrounding blood-red vortexes were like a bucket of water drilling into a crack, one after another bombarding towards Zish Xinhan, leaving behind one terrifying wound after another. Puchi! The clothes on Zish Xinhan's body burst apart, and his burly body was torn apart by the blood-colored vortex, leaving behind terrifying bloody holes. The most serious wound was the size of a fist, and it was the kind of wound that penetrated the body. Ziche Xianhan roared, his eyes red. The killing array around him had made him too angry. Roar! Zhe Xianhan roared towards the sky, and a dazzling blood-red light burst out from his body. Then his body began to squirm and change, expanding into a huge black bull that was 3 feet tall. The black bull's body was huge, and the surface of his body seemed to be forged from black gold, emitting a black gold luster. The bull's eyes, in particular, were emitting a strange grayish-white color. Zhe Xianhan is from the Dark Nether Bull clan. In the Primitive Heaven domain, the Dark Nether Bull clan and the Golden Armor clan are equally famous. They are both famous clans, second only to the top 10 clans. Immortal Master Zhua, you have to be careful of Zhe Xianhan's innate divine ability, Shadow Claw. Shadow Claw specifically targets the divine soul, and it's a very strange divine ability. After Mei Ying warned Zhuowen, who was at the edge of the killing array, he also revealed his true form, the nine-tailed fox form. Mei Ying's nine-tailed fox form was snow white, and his body was about the same size as Zhe Xianhan. Whoosh! The pure, white, nine-tailed fox's body emitted a faint light as soon as it appeared, and instantly disappeared. It was the nine-tailed fox's innate divine ability, Soul Raid. Mei Ying's Soul Raid in his true form was much more powerful than his human form. When Mei Ying teleported behind Zhe Xianhan, the latter did not even notice Mei Ying. Boom! The nine-tailed fox suddenly blasted out its sharp claws and slapped the black bull's back. The powerful claws directly scratched the black bull's back, leaving deep bloody marks. However, the black bull was not to be trifled with. The moment the nine-tailed fox launched an attack, it suddenly raised its hind legs and kicked the nine-tailed fox's chest. The nine-tailed fox fell to the ground from the kick, but the black bull was even more miserable. The wound on its back was immediately drilled by the bloody vortex, and the wound became bigger under the stirring of the bloody vortex. The inside of the wound became a bloody mess. The nine-tailed fox stood up again, roaring as it continued to fight the black bull. Zhuowen sat cross-legged at the edge of the killing array, maintaining the operation of the killing array and silently watching the battle in front of him. He found that the black bull's overall strength was stronger than the nine-tailed fox, but because it was firmly suppressed by the killing array, it was now at most on par with the nine-tailed fox. Although the injuries on the black bull's body were getting more and more terrifying, Zhuowen knew that those were only superficial wounds and did not have a particularly big impact on the black bull. Zhuowen sighed in his heart. The killing array he had modified was only at the early stage of the ascending heaven level and could only interfere with a mid-stage ascending heaven master like Zhe Xianhan. It was obviously not possible to seriously injure Zhe Xianhan. Zhuowen flicked his finger and took out the Yama's ghost portrait, which was filled with black gas. Chapter 3173. Demons and Monsters. A black scroll floated above Zhuowen's head. It was the Yama demon portrait. The moment Zhe Xianhan saw the Yama demon portrait, his pupils involuntarily shrank, revealing a look of astonishment. Piercing heaven-grade artifact, Zhe Xianhan muttered to himself. The moment the Yama demon portrait appeared, his mind felt as if it had been bombed by a bomb. He actually felt a strong sense of impending death. He hadn't felt this kind of feeling for a long time. He knew that the Yama demon portrait Zhuowen took out was definitely not an ordinary piercing heaven-grade artifact. He himself also had a piercing heaven-grade artifact, but it was always stored in a spatial artifact and couldn't be taken out. The sense of crisis that the Yama demon portrait gave him was too strong. He knew that the grade of this Yama demon portrait was probably higher than his life artifact. Originally, when Zhuowen took out the Hou-Yi Divine Bow, he was already very surprised. But now, this guy actually took out a divine artifact, even more terrifying than the Hou-Yi Divine Bow. Zhe Xianhan really began to panic. Zhua, Wen had become even more mysterious in his eyes. This guy seemed to have an endless number of trump cards. Every time he thought that this guy had already used his strongest trump card, he would later discover that this guy could still come up with an even stronger trump card. Mei Ying also noticed the Yama demon portrait floating above Zhuo Wen's head, but she wasn't too surprised. Back then, when she and Zhuo Wen had joined forces to deal with the terrifying green skeleton, Zhuo Wen had used the Yama ghost diagram to finally destroy the green skeleton. Mei Ying knew better than anyone how terrifying the Yama demon portrait was. Thinking of this, Mei Ying's gaze towards Zish Xinhan became somewhat pitiful. She knew that with the combination of the killing array and the terrifying Yama demon portrait, Zish Xinhan was finished. Ghost chain kill. Zhuo Wen's face was ferocious as he opened the first layer of the Yama demon portrait. Instantly, more than a dozen black chains swept out from the Yama demon portrait, crisscrossing the air and instantly appearing in all directions around Zish Xinhan. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In an instant, more than a dozen ghost chains wrapped around Zish Xinhan and kept shrinking. Zish Xianhan kept dodging the ghost chains, but the range of the ghost chains was shrinking. With one careless move, his right leg was bound by a ghost chain. Zish Xinhan's pupils shrank as an intense pain assaulted his divine soul. This kind of pain was as if his divine soul had been ruthlessly slashed by some kind of sharp weapon. Whoosh, whoosh. Zish Xinhan's figure paused, and the rest of the ghost chains instantly wrapped around him, binding him tightly. The intense pain made Zish Xinhan raise his head to the sky and scream, his whole body twitching. City Lord Mei Ying, kill him! Zhuo Wen's face was pale, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Using this ghost chain kill, his soul also had to bear a part of the pain. However, the current Zhuo Wen was much better. His divine soul had undergone a transformation and was much stronger. The difference between his divine soul and Zish Xinhan's was not that big, so Zhuo Wen could still withstand it. Mei Ying naturally would not let go of such a good opportunity. Like a white shadow, she flew out and used the soul surprise attack again. She turned into a ray of light and teleported in front of Zish Xinhan. Her right claw blasted out, and a powerful ray of light swept out from the giant claw. Then, it directly pierced towards the center of Zish Xinhan's eyebrows. This move was obviously intended to destroy Zish Xinhan's divine soul. Zish Xinhan also felt Mei Ying's killing intent, but he was tightly bound by the ghost chains. He struggled with difficulty and could not break free. However, in the face of the threat of death, Zish Xinhan obviously intended to go all out. He frantically burned his blood essence, and the aura on his body rapidly rose. Bang! Zish Xinhan forcibly broke free from the ghost chain kill, and then released his right leg. With a light step on the ground, he barely dodged Mei Ying's killing blow. Bang! 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 Zish Xinhan went completely crazy. The moment he burned his blood essence, his aura had reached an extremely terrifying level. The ghost chains on his body began to break one by one. The nine-tailed fox that Mei Ying manifested also realized that Zish Xinhan was going all out. She absolutely could not let him break free from the ghost chains. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Roar! When the nine-tailed fox approached Zish Xinhan again, before she could attack, the black bull that Zish Xinhan manifested suddenly opened its mouth and bit the nine-tailed fox's neck. Then, the black bull fiercely swung, and the nine-tailed fox was directly thrown to the ground. Blood gushed out of the nine-tailed fox's neck like a fountain. The nine-tailed fox struggled to get up, but after a few attempts, she lay back down on the ground. Her injuries were too serious, and she could not get up at all. Zhuo Wen's eyes were gloomy. Seeing the ghost chains on Zish Xinhan's body constantly breaking apart, he felt somewhat anxious. Although the killing array had been operating, Zish Shinhan was now in a berserk state. His strength had risen to an extremely terrifying level in an instant. The killing array did not have much effect on Zish Shinhan. "Little bastard, you're dead. You forced me to burn my blood essence. Even if I die today, I'll drag you down with me." Zish Shinhan was completely crazy. He was burning his blood essence at the cost of his life. He knew that after burning his blood essence, his chances of survival were not great. Knowing that he was going to die, he became even crazier. He would not stop until he killed Zhuowen. Bang! The last ghost face was broken by Zish Shinhan. Then, Zish Shinhan's 4 strong hooves stomped on the ground. Like a gust of black wind, he rushed toward Zhuowen. Zhuowen took a deep breath. Looking at the Yama ghost diagram above his head, his eyes flickered, and he whispered, "It seems that I can only use that move." The second layer of the Yama ghost diagram. "Open for me, demons, monsters." The Yama ghost diagram had 3 layers, and each layer had an extremely powerful force. The first layer of the Yama ghost diagram was the ghost chains, and the second layer was demons, monsters, monsters. The moment Zhuowen opened the second layer, his divine soul seemed to explode like countless bombs. His entire divine soul seemed to be ground into powder. The pain almost made him faint. This was the first time he opened the Yama ghost diagram. He did not expect that the second layer would burden his divine soul so much, but he endured it and forced himself to stay awake. He did not want to faint. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the huge black bull that was charging toward him. Gee. A very terrifying sound came from the Yama ghost diagram, and even more dense black chi gushed out from it. Behind the black chi, a vague black shadow slowly emerged, crawling out from the second layer of the Yama ghost diagram. The black shadow was slightly taller than the average human. Its face was unclear, but it had a pair of blood-red eyes. The moment the black shadow came out, the surrounding aura suddenly became cold and gloomy. The black shadow looked coldly at Zhuowen, then immediately let out a shrill cry and rushed toward the huge black bull. Boom! Zhuowen was surprised to find that the black shadow only threw a punch, and the berserk black bull was smashed to the ground. Then the black shadow punched down again, and the black bull let out a cry of fear as blood splattered. However, the following scene caused Zhuowen to frown. Chapter 30-174. Subduing the Dark Rock Divine City Crunch. Crunch. The horrifying sound of chewing resounded in this space. Zhuowen and Mei Ying felt their scalps go numb. "No, spare me. I won't dare to do it again." Zish Shinhan was terrified. He looked at Zhuowen with his huge bull eyes and made a pleading sound. This black shadow was too strange. Its strength had reached a terrifying level. In front of this black shadow, Zish Shinhan was simply unable to fight back. The black shadow ignored Zish Shinhan's pleas. Its right hand grabbed Zish Shinhan's body and tore off a large piece of flesh, chewing it with relish. Zhuowen looked at this scene and couldn't help but frown. However, his divine soul was seriously injured from opening the second layer of the Yama demon diagram. Now he had a splitting headache. He wanted to use his divine sense to control the black shadow, but he found that the black shadow didn't seem to care about him at all. Zish Shinhan's screams grew weaker and weaker until they finally returned to silence. Zhuowen found that Zish Shinhan's flesh had been completely devoured by the black shadow, leaving behind only a huge skeleton. After the black shadow finished eating Zish Shinhan's flesh, its right hand suddenly slapped Zish Shinhan's skull. Zish Shinhan's skull cracked open, and a ray of dim light shot out like an arrow, fleeing into the distance. Unfortunately, the black shadow stretched out its right hand and caught the ray of dim light. Looking carefully, this dim light was Zish Shinhan's appearance. It was equivalent to a miniature version of Zish Shinhan. This was Zish Shinhan's divine soul. The divine soul of a master of sky piercing was not so easy to destroy. They had all kinds of sky-piercing methods to protect their divine soul from harm. Just now, Zish Shinhan's divine soul was fleeing at a very fast speed. Even an ordinary sky-piercing master wouldn't be able to realize that it was Zish Shinhan's divine soul. However, the Black Shadow was able to casually grab Zish Shinhan's divine soul in its hand. It was clear that this Black Shadow's strength was not ordinary. "I beg you, let me go. I'm willing to give you Dark Rock Divine City. I can give you everything in the Massacre Heavenly Domain as long as you let me go. I beg you." Zish Shinhan was really frightened. His divine soul cast a pleading look at Zhuowen as he spoke in a low voice. Zhuowen smiled bitterly. Now, Zish Shinhan only had his spiritual soul left. Moreover, his spiritual soul was seriously injured. If Zish Shinhan wanted to reconstruct his fleshly body, then his cultivation realm would inevitably fall. He would no longer pose any threat to Zhuowen. Therefore, it was natural for him to spare Zish Shinhan's life. However, the Black Shadow was completely out of his control. It completely ignored his divine will and acted arbitrarily. Zish Shinhan's words were only half spoken when his soul was swallowed up by the Black Shadow. After getting rid of Zish Shinhan, the Black Shadow's pair of scarlet eyes looked towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen's heart trembled. He saw greed and desire in that pair of scarlet eyes. This guy can't be thinking of devouring me, right? Sure enough, after the Black Shadow glanced at Zhuowen, it actually pounced on Zhuowen. The greed in its eyes became even more intense. Damn it! What is this thing that's released from the second level of the Yama demon diagram? It's simply a madman. Zhuowen's face was ugly. His spiritual soul communicated with the Yama demon diagram and began to suppress the Black Shadow. The Black Shadow suddenly fell to the ground. It held its head and kept rolling, letting out a low roar. The moment the Black Shadow rolled, Zhuowen reluctantly threw the Yama demon diagram to the Black Shadow. The Black Shadow was sucked back into the Yama demon diagram. The Yama demon diagram closed again. Zhuowen fell to the ground with a thump. His face was pale, and he had a splitting headache. He directly fainted. The consumption of the Yama demon diagram on the spiritual soul was too terrifying. Although Zhuowen's spiritual soul had transformed once before, it was enough to withstand the pressure of the first level of the Yama demon diagram. However, the consumption of the second level of the Yama demon diagram on the spiritual soul was too terrifying. Even the current Zhuowen was somewhat unable to bear it. When Zhuowen woke up again, he found himself lying in an antique room surrounded by the scent of red sandalwood. "Immortal Master Zhua, you're finally awake." A timid yet admiring voice sounded beside the bed. Zhuowen turned his head and found the Dragon Clan youth, Hao Rui, standing not far from the bed. When Hao Rui saw Zhuowen looking over, his body involuntarily stiffened. His eyes were filled with nervousness. "How long have I been unconscious? Where is this place?" Zhuowen held his forehead and asked in a deep voice. Hao Rui hurriedly said, "You were unconscious for 2 days and 2 nights. This is the city, Lord Manor of the Dark Rock Divine City. The Dark Rock Divine City is now under the complete control of the City Lord. Everyone in the Dark Rock Divine City is willing to submit to the City Lord." Zhuowen nodded. He wasn't surprised that Mei Ying was able to control the Dark Rock Divine City. The City Lord and the upper echelons of the Dark Rock Divine City had all been wiped out. There wasn't even a creator in the city. Most importantly, the Dark Rock Divine City's Great Array had been destroyed by Zhuowen. In other words, the Dark Rock Divine City had lost the support of the Great Array. The city was no longer filled with heavenly Tao energy. Without the heavenly Tao energy, the battle power of the people in the dark rock divine city had decreased by more than half. Furthermore, the city lord manor had a killing array set up by Zhuowen. Mei Ying could use the city lord manor as the core and easily occupy the other parts of the dark rock divine city. Immortal Master Zhua, the city lord has instructed me to inform him immediately once you're awake. I'll take my leave first. Hao Rui looked at Zhuowen cautiously. His eyes were filled with inquiry. Zhuowen nodded. Hao Rui cupped his hands and left the room. Only Zhuowen was left in the room. His expression wasn't good. His divine soul was severely injured. It would take some time for him to recover. The Yama-ghost portrait is really a divine weapon that harms others and oneself. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He had a love-hate relationship with the Yama-ghost portrait. The power of the Yama-ghost portrait was beyond his expectations. However, the danger was so great that he couldn't bear it. Zhuowen even suspected that if he didn't have the Pangu banner to protect his divine soul, he would have been killed by the Yama-ghost portrait when he first used it. I'm still too weak. Zhuowen sighed softly. He knew that if his soul was strong enough, then he would be able to bring forth even greater might from the Yama's ghost portrait. Moreover, the black shadow released from the second level of the Yama's ghost portrait would probably not dare to attack him. This time, I must raise my cultivation before I enter the forbidden area. Zhuowen muttered. At that moment, the door opened. Mei Ying brought great guardianing Jia and Hao Rui in. Immortal Master Zhua, you're finally awake. Mei Ying was excited to see Zhuowen awake. He hurried to Zhuowen's bedside. Then Mei Ying and Zhuowen talked about what had happened in the past 2 days. The main thing that had happened over the past 2 days was that Mei Ying had forcefully subdued the Dark Rock Divine City. However, Mei Ying hinted that the third Divine City in the Massacre Sky territory, the Quiet Sun Divine City, had become restless after receiving news that the Dark Rock Divine City had been destroyed. It seemed like they were going to send their troops to attack the Dark Rock Divine City. Chapter 3175. Mei Su and Jiang Ye's crisis. Mei Ying's eyes flashed with worry when the Quiet Sun Divine City was mentioned. Zhuowen smiled faintly. City Lord Mei Ying, you don't have to worry about this. If the Quiet Sun Divine City really comes, they will be the ones in trouble, not us. Mei Ying glanced at Zhuowen and smiled sweetly. The reason why she mentioned the Quiet Sun Divine City was not without reason. She had been waiting for Zhuowen to say this. The Dark Rock Divine City's array was basically destroyed. If the Quiet Sun Divine City came, they would have no choice but to abandon the city and flee. However, Mei Ying knew that Zhuowen was a heaven-piercing divine array master. As long as Zhuowen agreed to set up a defensive array in the Dark Rock Divine City, no matter how many people the Quiet Sun Divine City sent, it would be useless. Zhuowen naturally saw through Mei Ying's intentions. However, he didn't mind. Mei Ying had helped him a few times. How could he not help her with this small matter? Immortal Master Zhua, this is the location of the Forbidden Zone in the Massacre Sky domain. The location of this Forbidden Zone is very mysterious. You can't find it without a map. Take good care of this map. Mei Ying handed a sheepskin map to Zhuowen. Zhuowen didn't refuse and kept the map. This was what he had agreed to with Mei Ying. Immortal Master Zhua, it's all thanks to you that we were able to take down the Dark Rock Divine City. How about this? You will be the city lord of the Dark Rock Divine City. As for the jade or veins, I only want 10%. The rest is yours, Mei Ying said. Zhuowen looked at Mei Ying in surprise. He didn't expect Mei Ying to give him so much jade or veins. Just as he was about to reject, Mei Ying said seriously, Immortal Master Zhua, you must accept this. Most of the credit for taking down the Dark Rock Divine City goes to you. You deserve all of this." Seeing Mei Ying's determination, Zhuowen could only nod. He then asked, "City Lord Mei Ying, how are Miss Mei Su and Uncle Jiang?" Mei Ying's beautiful eyes dimmed as she said in a low voice, "The soul-devouring parasites in Mei Su and Jiang Ye's divine souls are getting more and more rampant. Their current condition is very bad. I don't think they can hold on for much longer." Zhu Wen's expression changed slightly, and he said, "Solemnly, City Lord Mei Ying, bring me over to take a look. Maybe I have a way to solve it." Mei Ying glanced at Zhuowen and shook his head. "Immortal Master Zhua, although your formation Tao level is indeed very high, it's impossible to deal with the soul-devouring parasite with formations unless it's a high-level alchemist. For the past 2 days, I have sought out all the pill refiners in Dark Rock God City. Even the strongest pill refiner, Lin Hu, was unable to solve the problem of the soul-devouring parasite. He could only help suppress it. Even so, I'm afraid I won't be able to suppress it for much longer. Just take me there." Zhuowen said seriously. Mei Ying nodded and led Zhuowen to Mei Su and Jiang Ye's room. Mei Su and Jiang Ye's rooms weren't far from Zhuowen's, so they arrived in a few minutes. However, there were 2 guards standing outside the door. When the 2 guards saw Mei Ying, they respectfully knelt on the ground and greeted the city lord. Mei Ying nodded and asked, "Is pill refiner Lin Hu inside?" One of the guards nodded and asked hesitantly, "City Lord, are you going in?" "Yes, why? Is there a problem?" Mei Ying understood the meaning behind the guard's words. "It's like this. Pill refiner Lin, who has instructed that without his permission, no one is allowed to enter. Even the city lord has to wait outside and wait for him to come out." The guard said respectfully. Mei Ying frowned slightly. She glanced at Zhuowen and nodded. "Since pill refiner Lin, who has said so, we will wait." Zhuowen was deep in thought. That lakeside alchemist, Mei Ying, had told him that he was the most powerful alchemist in Dark Rock Divine City. He was actually a Genesis alchemist and was highly regarded by Ziju Xinhan after Ziju Xianhan died, and Dark Rock God City was taken over by Mei Ying, pill refiner Lin, who served Mei Ying. Even Hong Xian Divine City did not have a Genesis pill refiner. Mei Ying naturally would not let go of such a talent. As long as pill refiner Lin, who had any request, Mei Ying would do his best to satisfy him. "No, we will go in and take a look now. City Lord Mei Ying, you should know that the soul-devouring parasite is extremely dangerous. If we are late, Miss Mei Su and Uncle Jiang will be in more danger." Zhuowen waved his sleeves and opened the door, ignoring the 2 guards' hesitation. Boom! The moment the door was opened, a strong force flew towards Zhuowen's vitals. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and kicked off with his right foot, dodging the strong force. He turned around and saw the true face of the strong force. It was a pitch-black dagger. "Who is it? How dare you barge into my room?" In the middle of the room, a very old foreign race elder glared at Zhuowen, who had dodged the dagger. Zhuowen knew that this foreign race elder was the pill refiner Lin, who that Mei Ying had mentioned. Mei Ying hurried forward to stop the enraged foreign race elder and said, "Pill refiner Lin, who, don't be angry. We are also worried about Mei Su and Jiang Yi." When pill refiner Lin, who saw that it was Mei Ying, the anger on his face faded a little. He said with some displeasure, "City Lord, I have already told you that I cannot be disturbed during the treatment. How can you let this person do as he pleases?" Mei Ying hurriedly explained. Zhuowen ignored pill refiner Lin, who and Mei Ying, and strode towards Mei Su and Jiang Yi, who were lying on the bed. The 2 of them were lying quietly on the bed. Zhuowen reached out to feel their pulse, and his face instantly turned ugly when pill refiner Lin, who saw Zhuowen approaching his patients. He was furious. He immediately went forward to criticize Zhuowen. "Who are you? These two are my patients. What are you doing here? Get lost." Slap. Zhuowen slapped Pill Refiner Lin, whose face. Pill Refiner Lin, who fell to the ground, and his cheeks swelled up. Pill Refiner Lin, who was stunned. Mei Ying was also stunned. "Immortal Master Zhuo, what are you doing?" Pill Refiner Lin, who is saving Mei Su and Jiang Yi. "How can you do this?" Mei Ying's beautiful eyes were filled with anger. Her tone became impulsive and agitated. "City Lord Mei Ying, if you let this guy continue with the treatment, Miss Mei Su and Uncle Jiang will become zombies. They will lose their consciousness completely." Zhuowen said coldly. Mei Ying was stunned and subconsciously asked, "What do you mean?" Alchemist Riverside stood up and roared furiously, "Ignorant brat, you've got guts, actually daring to hit me. City Lord, this person is here to cause trouble. Why aren't you arresting him? If you dare to say another word, I will kill you immediately." Zhuowen looked coldly at Pill Refiner Lin, who was frightened by Zhuowen's glare and did not dare to say another word. Zhuowen came to the bedside and took out 2 divine pills to recover the soul from the outside world. He fed them to Mei Su and Jiang Yi. Pill Refiner Lin, who was in a rage, was dumbfounded when he saw the divine pills that Zhuowen fed to Mei Su and Jiang Yi. 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill. Pill Refiner Lin, whose eyes were filled with shock. He recognized the 2 divine pills that Zhuowen gave him. The 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill was a fortune-grade divine pill. It was a precious divine pill that specialized in recovering the soul. This divine pill was very precious, and its value was comparable to an ordinary heaven-grade divine pill. The reason for this was because the main ingredient of this divine pill was the realm-eluding underworld soulflower. The realm-eluding underworld soulflower was extremely rare and was a divine pill that could only be found by chance. In the past, Zhuowen had obtained some realm-eluding underworld soulflowers from the 10 Extremities Incorp sect and the 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill from Ji Wuming. After he became a creation-grade alchemist, he refined some 8 Scenery's soul-consolidating divine pills in case he needed them when his spirit was severely injured. Chapter 3176. Alchemist, Lin Hu stared at Zhuowen in a daze. He swallowed the scolding he was about to spit out. He knew very well that this kid was able to take out the 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill. Either this kid had a creation-grade pill master backing him, or he was a creation-grade pill master himself. Of course, Alchemist Lin Hu felt that the former was more likely. He watched coldly from the sidelines. In his opinion, the 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill could only help Mei Su and Jiang Yi recover a portion of their souls. It was basically impossible to get rid of the soul-devouring parasite. Zhuowen looked too young. Alchemist Lin Hu naturally did not think that this kid's alchemy skills were high. It was impossible for him to do anything about the soul-devouring parasite in Mei Su and Jiang Ye's bodies. Alchemist Lin Hu did not say anything to stop Zhuowen. He wanted to see what kind of expression this kid would have when he could not get rid of the soul-devouring parasite. Zhuowen naturally did not know what Alchemist Lin Hu was thinking after he fed the 8 Scenery's soul-condensing divine pill to Mei Su and Jiang Ye's mouths. He could clearly see that their complexions had improved. However, Zhuowen's expression did not relax. Mei Ying had previously told him that the soul-devouring parasite was extremely strange. When it entered the depths of a cultivator's forehead, it immediately began to gnaw on their soul. If there were enough soul-devouring parasites, even if it was an expert of the master of Tongtian, his soul would be immediately devoured by the soul-devouring parasites, and he would die. Zhuo Wen knew that if he wanted to expel the soul-devouring parasite, he couldn't just rely on divine pills. Instead, he needed to use his divine sense to probe Mei Su and Jiang Ye's divine souls and forcefully extract the parasite. In the Massacre Heavenly Domain, no cultivator's divine sense could be used. Previously, Zhuowen was able to forcefully use his divine sense because of the Panga banner. Moreover, he had paid a hefty price. Thinking of this, Zhuowen said to Mei Ying, "City Lord Mei Ying, I am now preparing to save Miss Mei Su and Uncle Jiang. During this period, I must not be disturbed. You can leave now." Alchemist Riverside's eyes were dark as he said in a low voice, "City Lord, this child might not even know how to refine pills. If you let him treat you, you won't be leading him astray. If something goes wrong, it will be a matter of life and death." "Master Immortal Zhuo, I'm counting on you." Mei Ying did not bother about Pill Master Riverside. Instead, he asked Protector Ying Jia to drag Pill Master Riverside out of the room before closing the door. "City Lord Mei Ying, you would rather believe an ignorant child than me?" Alchemist Lin Hu looked very displeased. He looked at Mei Ying with a questioning gaze. Protector Ying Jia was rather displeased with Alchemist Riverside's attitude and said coldly, "Alchemist Riverside, is this the attitude you should have towards a city lord?" Mei Ying stopped Great Guardian Ying Jia as her beautiful eyes stared coldly at Alchemist Lin Hu. She asked solemnly, "Alchemist Lin Hu, do you know who is inside?" Alchemist Lin Hu felt that the atmosphere was a little heavy and subconsciously asked, "Who is this?" "He is Zhuowen. He is also the Master Immortal Zhuo, who has been the talk of the town in Dark Rock Divine City recently. I said that if he insists on killing you, I don't have the right to kill him," Mei Ying said coldly. Alchemist Lin Hu's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning as it exploded. Zhuowen's name had spread throughout Dark Rock Divine City over the past few days. It was extremely sensational. There was no one in Dark Rock Divine City who didn't know this name. It was said that Master Immortal Zhuo was a terrifyingly powerful heaven-piercing array Dao Master. According to the rumors, Master Immortal Zhuo used his own strength to control all the arrays in Dark Rock Divine City. In the end, he gathered the power of all the arrays in Dark Rock Divine City and gathered them in the City Lord's residence to form a heaven-piercing array. Master Immortal Zhuo used this array to eliminate all the higher-ups in Dark Rock Divine City. Dark Rock Divine City's City Lord, Che Xinhan, also died in his hands. It could be said that Master Immortal Zhuo was a ruthless person in the hearts of everyone in Dark Rock Divine City. This person was simply too ruthless. Even a heaven-piercing expert, like the City Lord of Dark Rock Divine City, Che Xinhan, had died in his hands. Who else could fight with such a ruthless person? "Thank you, City Lord Mei Ying." Alchemist Lin Hu hurriedly knelt on one knee and thanked Mei Ying with cupped fists. He was extremely terrified. He never expected that the young man he was shouting at was actually the ruthless person who had single-handedly eliminated the higher-ups in the City Lord's residence. City Lord Mei Ying helped Alchemist Lin Hu up and consoled him. "Alchemist Lin Hu, you don't have to be too worried. Master Immortal Zhuo isn't an unreasonable person. However, you can't shout at him like this from now on." Alchemist Lin Hu was very submissive. After knowing Zhuowen's identity, he wouldn't dare to treat Zhuowen with such an attitude, even if he was given 10 guts. At this moment, in the room, Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed. He closed his eyes and began to mobilize the Panga banner in his divine soul. With the help of the Panga banner, Zhuowen forcibly used his divine sense. His divine sense shot into Mei Su's glabella like a sharp arrow and entered the deepest part of her divine soul. In Mei Su's divine soul, Zhuowen found that her divine soul looked like it had been gnawed by worms. It was riddled with holes and looked very broken. His divine, sense continued to penetrate deeper. Soon, he found 3 worm-like shadows in the depths of Meisu's divine soul. He knew that these 3 worm-like shadows should be the soul-devouring parasites that Mei had mentioned. The 3 soul-devouring parasites seemed to have sensed the aura of Zhuowen's divine sense. Like birds that were startled by the twang of a bow, they let out ferocious cries. Then, the 3 soul-devouring parasites turned into 3 shadows and rushed towards Zhuowen's divine sense. Zhuowen snorted coldly in his heart. With the Panga banner, his divine sense had become extremely powerful, especially since his divine sense had been tainted with the aura of Panga land. The 3 soul-devouring parasites did not pose much of a threat to him. Sizzle! Sizzle! Sure enough, the moment the 3 soul-devouring parasites rushed into Zhuowen's divine sense, they emitted wisps of white smoke and began to rise. In just an instant, the 3 soul-devouring parasites were wiped out by Zhuowen's divine sense. After Zhuowen withdrew his divine sense from Meisu's divine soul, he clearly saw that Meisu's complexion had become much better, and her breathing had become much smoother. Next, Zhuowen once again probed into Jiang Ye's divine soul with his divine sense. There were fewer soul-devouring parasites in Jiang Ye's divine soul than Meisu's. There was only 1 soul-devouring parasite, so Zhuowen easily destroyed it. When Zhuowen's divine sense withdrew from Jiang Ye's divine soul, he almost knelt on the ground with a thump. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead, and his expression was slack. He had forcibly used his divine sense. Even with the help of the Panga banner, he still paid a great price, and his divine soul was severely damaged. Zhuowen took out an 8-scenery soul-condensing divine pill and swallowed it. Although he still had a splitting headache, it was much better than before. Looking at Meisu and Jiang Yi, who were still unconscious, Zhuowen's expression became extremely solemn.